So Moises asked for this stream, and I haven't been watching Synod, so I don't actually know what's going on. And apparently, Grizz is also. Um, so, yeah, I'm just going to mute myself. And if people who've been watching actually want to come and do stuff, there's Mo.
Hey, Jacob, how are you?
Good. Long time no talk.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Life's been ridiculous.
I haven't watched anything today. I have no idea what's going on. So this is your show.
Yeah, so basically today, last night they moved forward report 9.1. There were 8 of them. So basically all that they've done today is go through the rest of report 9.
Mm-hmm.
They've approved everything except, I believe they just recently voted down recommendation 7, which was to defer Overture 42 until next year.
What's Overture 42?
It had to do with special exceptions. So I believe everything else was dealing with gravamen and kind of an overgeneralized, if you take some exception to the confessions. And then Overture 42 dealt with the possibility of special exceptions and there being room for that. And I guess Committee 9, and I could be misunderstanding this, was like, when it comes to very special things, let's have a committee deal with that in the next Synod. And it seems like that was struck down.
I noticed, I was looking on Twitter. I noticed they turned off the chat on the live stream.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with it, I swear. They had blocked me on the chat from before.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing you in the comments area at all.
I noticed this morning they had already blocked me, and then I was I had a colonoscopy this morning, so
okay.
I didn't actually watch anything, but I found that hilarious. And as far as I can tell, they specifically said if you don't agree with the Heidelberg Catechism on homosexuality, this is definitely a confessional salvific issue. I think they use the term, and so that's what I saw on Twitter.
So I believe there is a report that says that. I don't know that they've gotten to that specific report. I think that actually is a different committee, but I could be wrong on that one because I haven't seen them talk about that. Although I haven't been watching like super carefully, I've just been kind of jumping in and out, participating in some of the discussion. But basically, they have the gravamen kind of issues settled, and basically what this report did was elaborate what that means. What does it mean to file a gravamen? What is the actual procedure? Before it was kind of left to a church council to kind of figure that out. And to a certain degree it is, but they've just established a lot more boundaries on it. So you can't just it's no longer just a loophole to be abused.
So this is what I was looking at. That might be difficult for people to see. So according to Kent Hendricks, who is apparently at Zonder Academic, Overture 29 from Iacota asks Synod to declare that Heidelberg Catechism question and answer 108 addresses a salvation issue and remove from office those who disagree. So I have no idea.
Yeah, that's an overture to Synod. Okay. I don't know that they've dealt with that overture yet.
Okay.
So I don't know that that's been approved. I believe that's just an overture that was dealt with in one of the committees.
I see. Okay. So yeah.
It's been interesting watching the Twitter conversation. I feel like it hasn't been nearly as robust as last year. Last year Twitter was going nuts all the time.
I get the feeling a lot of people are deliberately not talking on Twitter, and this was the feeling I had last year as well. Like, CRC people seem to be of the opinion that it's best not to discuss this stuff at all. And turning off the live stream, like chat, it's like, really, like, which century are we in? You're turning off live stream. From what I've heard, CRC Voices is quite active. I don't know. I've never been on there. But yeah, I'm not hearing a lot of discussion.
Yeah, so on the comments, the YouTube comments that they closed today, there was a bit of lively discussion. It started to seem like close to a discussion on like a PVK live stream, and yeah, there's a lot of people in the CRC that don't have an appetite for that. And so what I've seen on Twitter was interesting is, I felt like last year, a lot of my Twitter activity was basically responding to people kind of exercising or utilizing the racism of low expectations. Like, oh, this is just a bunch of white guys making a decision, completely ignoring the minorities in the room.
Yeah.
There's been a little bit of that this year, but not nearly to the same degree.
There hasn't been much of anything on Twitter. I mean, I saw a little bit of that. I saw somebody talking about what's the name? Infant baptism. Mm-hmm. I really do think in infant baptism, it's at least going to become like a bigger issue with the new gravamen process, because I get the impression from what people have been saying that there's been a lot of Credo Baptists basically serving as elders in all over the place.
Yeah, and so and I'm not super familiar with all the different churches and what's going on with the Credo baptism versus Paedo baptism. What it seems to me in my limited exposure is that the CRC for a long time has really struggled when it came to church planting. Mm-hmm. And so then they, well, we want to work with this church planter who's interested in planting within our denomination. Well, he doesn't subscribe to this thing. Well, we'll kind of try to look past it for whatever reason, whether it be the baptism issue or whether it be other issues within the confessions. And this hasn't been everywhere within the denomination, but it's been in a few different areas that kind of do it over and over and over again. So you probably have several different people that, yeah, this is going to be an issue with. But part of that is that the CRC has been letting a lot of people become office bearers for a very long time that don't hold to the confessions in a variety of ways.
Yeah, so one of the hashtags I put on this was boot Alvin, because apparently Alvin Plantinga, whether or not Alvin Plantinga is part of your church, is more definitional than the Bible in the CRC. And I got into a little Twitter thing with somebody, and I said to him, well, I'm not even Christian, and apparently I'm more CRC than Alvin Plantinga is. And he said to me, well, how do you, I don't know how you can be CRC and not a Christian. And I said, I'm preparing a gravamen.
That is funny.
So, I don't know where I'm going to submit the gravamen, but I have a few confessional difficulties with the three forms of unity.
And the New Testament, and
hey, confessional revision gravamen. I don't see why I can't submit a confessional revision gravamen like anybody else.
yeah, that whole Plantinga thing was hilarious because the point.
It got a groan. It got a groan, and
the point that the guy was trying to make is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Alvin is no longer part of the CRC. And so what he's saying is, if Alvin's no longer part of the CRC, then I am in fact more CRC than Alvin because he's not here anymore. Right. He obviously disagreed enough to walk away.
Well, the guy who said that was Patrick. I think he's in Paul's classes.
Okay.
I looked it up because he says Central California, and then I looked on the classes there. So any rate, but did you hear the audible groans when he said that from some in the crowd?
Yeah, I did. But it's one of those things where, like, I felt like the point that he was making was fairly obvious. It's like Alvin Plantinga, once upon a time, was this very spearhead of our denomination. But people change, and eventually he found himself in a place where he wanted to be someplace else. If that's the case, I'm not super up to date on everything, but if that's the case, I don't have a problem with him saying, "Hey, I feel like I'm better situated in a different place." He accomplished in his day what his goals were then. Maybe he has different goals now, and to say, "Well, now we are the church established by Alvin Plantinga," I'm just like, I don't think that holds water. I don't think it passes scrutiny on the force of it. It's like, yes, he was a very significant contributor to CRC thought.
Also, he's 91 years old.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if you're claiming, like, we need to reform and modernize the CRC, maybe like this ain't your grandfather's church isn't the problem.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of weird things. And I feel like most of the people that were kind of jumping on that Alvin Plantinga thing are just looking for something to be mad at.
So do you know, I mean, Lance, did you watch everything? I haven't watched any of it.
Yep, I watched. Did you catch the end, Mo, where they, on the very end of the Committee 9?
How they voted down 7?
Well, so basically, I watched through that. At the very end, they wanted to punt an overture.
Yeah, overture 42.
Which wanted to basically reopen a whole bunch of exceptions, right? And so basically that got voted against. So that overture is basically killed. It got brought into everything else. So all the hard work that they put in to actually put this process into place is sustained. Now people can bring new overtures. I was kind of surprised. And when I heard, it sounded like it was just one gentleman. In order to get just a single report, they agreed to punt this overture 42. I thought the best case against it was when someone came in and said, "Listen, we finally figured out something that we can start working through, right?
Yeah.
And we spent all this time to get this set up, and now we're going to have this here." And some people will say, "Well, we need to wait till Synod 2025. What are they going to decide about, overture 42?" I thought that was the best case. It's like, you know what? Everything is about trying to move forward with the Synod 2022 and 2023. So that was a little drama. So that's why I was late. There was a little drama right at the end. And the vote on that came a lot closer than anything we've seen. It was 101 to 70. I think I put it on X. 101.
Yeah, it was a pretty close one.
Yeah, but it passed. And, quite frankly, like, you've done all this hard work. This is the Synod, and I mentioned this after last Synod on my Substack. This is the Synod to finish the work of 22 and 23, right? You need to start at this point saying, okay, you're either with us or you're against us. I mean, and we can hide behind, this isn't about some sort of gravamina, about some obscure thing in the canons of Dort, right? This is going to the very heart of what the problem is. And so it'll be interesting. Like, if I were Derek and I'm up there, one of my strategies would be, they've got a lot of these committee reports in this year, a lot earlier than last year, right? Mm-hmm. I'd move to the stickiest, hardest things and I'd bring them up first. I would just stack and pack the more difficult stuff to make sure you get to it.
It seems like that's kind of what's happening. Like, I feel like as I'm looking at all the different reports, they seem to have plenty of time to finish what's necessary.
Yeah, 100%. As long as he's doing what he's doing. Here's the other thing which I find is interesting, which is you need to give time, but we don't have to give 2 hours for everything now. When every vote keeps coming back up 70 to 30, 70 to 20, 74, 20, 26, 74, 20. At this point, people know what they're there to do, and people have their decisions made. And so, and everyone knows, like, particularly when you get into Committee 8, that was worked through last year. It's been around. It's been punted once. I just get into that stuff and get after it. And I do think what you're seeing is, and what's come through these votes and what these people are communicating is, they move Committee 8, or actually the 9. They basically were saying you had to get in line, and if you don't get in line by the next Synod, right, it gives them this 3-year that was the compromise.
Yeah, and that's for the new ones. That's for the new ones, because they're about to deal with a discipline one that has to do with the existing stuff.
Right. So Jacob, I know Jacob's highly suspect that he doesn't think that they're going to do what they need to do just to actually follow through and bring discipline. Reading the tea leaves where I'm at right now, I think I think that they're going to follow through. People have understood that there needs to be a pathway to disaffiliation and so on and so forth.
Well, Jacob, have you seen the report for Committee AD?
I haven't looked at anything.
That's the one that deals with the discipline for the churches that have already, identified themselves as church in protest or have put statements on their page. And I think the Committee 9 gravamen, basically it deals with here moving forward. The ones that already have shown themselves to be the problematic ones, both the minority and majority report, if I'm reading them correctly, basically say you got a year to be gone or get yourself into shape.
So why is there a minority report?
I don't know. Like, I can't tell. Like, I skimmed them. I didn't have time to look through them in real detail, but they looked very similar to me. So I'm not sure what the difference is. I probably need somebody with better eyes for that.
If people are listening, what you're talking about with the section 1, where they're talking about they need to come in line with the teachings. Herb, our friend Herb, was on that committee, so he's in the majority opinion there.
Okay.
There's actually, you have that, and some interesting things with some of the stuff is you've got section 1, and then when you get into the Committee 2, one of those has a minority A and a minority B report associated with that, which is really interesting. And then section 8 with discipline. We've got this stuff out. We still have 8D. They haven't posted it yet.
8D, okay.
It's not posted.
I was thinking by 8E 8D. It's weird because I was able to click on that earlier today, and I looked at.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, they do. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did too. I pulled it up. It's just not linked right now.
But yeah, I couldn't do it. Yeah, because I'm looking. What do I have here?
So if people want to, the things that are coming up, we've got, if they get into 1F, that should be an interesting decision point. We look at 2, and then obviously when we start getting to 8, the discipline matters. Those will be the ones where you'll start seeing.
And I feel like Derek is playing this really wisely. Because the last thing that he wants is for somebody to make some kind of accusation that he's guiding it in a certain direction. So he's like, I want to feel the body on this. I'm pretty sure he knows what the body is.
And that's the point. Like when you have a 70% out there, you've got to do it. As I started to think about that, Synod 2022 was the shock. Synod 2023 was the anger. As we start talking about the grief, and that was the anger, right? And that was the fight at the funeral, as Paul. They picked up the emotional screws and they came after it hard, and then they ultimately found that it held, that the moderates held to the confessions and the once held always beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And this is, I think, there's some resignation to this to a certain extent at that level that they understand it. Particularly when you look at that gravamen process, and I get why Paul I get what you need to be careful with that. To be fair, you need to be careful with that, right? And with that, I mean, it's serious, and you shouldn't play fast and loose with the gravamen process because there are some real reasons to it. But as they work through that, I mean, to me, it looks pretty clear that they're going to come along. There's a discipleship. You come into confession on the HSR positions, or you don't. And if you don't, then you can't be a minister. You can leave in good standing, but you can't be a minister. You can't be an office bearer.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I remember last year at the end of Synod, kind of, or after maybe a week or two, digesting a bit and almost feeling a little bit glad that they hadn't finished. Because I think if they had finished Committee 8 last year, too many people would feel like, okay, we're done. And the work wouldn't actually get done. It'd be like, oh, it was decided. Somebody else will take care of this now. But the fact that they didn't do that, everybody was still like, man, we still have a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like even the feeling amongst people during the Synod, seeing it going the way that it is, like even after this week is done, we still have work to do.
Well, right. That's the thing. Like, and was it the United Methodist Church? Like, the conservatives won, and then
the progressives won in United Methodist. They are full blown.
Yeah,
they played the OJ's Love Train at the end of their general conference and a pride rally.
But isn't what happened? I mean, maybe I'm thinking of a different denomination, but I heard some denomination. A few years ago, the conservatives won, and they thought they had won, and then recently there was a resurgence because the leftists don't stop. The conservatives stop. They're like, okay, we're done. We can go home. We can stop paying attention to them.
Hey, Mo, are you going to stop?
Well, the thing is, that's the feeling I got last year is that if they had finished a lot, and maybe not me, but I'm still very low level when it comes to the denomination. I have some people's ears, but I don't have that kind of pull. But I feel like there were a lot of people that would have rested easier if they had finished last year. I feel like this year they're a little bit more aware that, hey, yeah, no, they're not going to stop, and so we have to keep going.
Well, I think Aaron Vriesman's conversations with PVK was really good. Like, I thought it was really good. And when, he didn't pull any punches, and he's like, the time is now. Like, it's the same thing I said in my Substack. It's the time for the divorces now. This is oil and water. These are two worldviews that are not going to change. They can't come together. And he pointed to, he's most angry at Better Together. Mm-hmm. The Lilly-funded $1 million, that's the Trojan horse. Better Together is the Trojan horse of the affirmers to try and come in and swing enough moderates to come back over to their side so they can do that, right? Yeah. So,
and I think the Trojan horse metaphor is actually perfect for that, because it's one of those things when it comes to like a certain kind of ideology of like we are better together. If that were authentic, I'm very much there. I get there a lot. I mean, I feel like there is so much that we can learn from one another and whatnot. I just don't feel like the Better Together folks, many of them, are actually believe that.
You can't be better. I'm sorry, you can't be better together with activists. You can't.
Yeah.
One thing I noted was somebody on Twitter said it would have been a lot less painful if the conservatives had left instead. And it was like, the vote was 3-1, and you wanted the conservatives to leave. Right?
Well, Paul mentioned that on one of his videos. He's like, some of the people that progress, the elites are like, well, why don't they just leave? And they're like, guys, do you not get how this works?
Yeah, they're still in denial about the numbers, many of them. They still think, well, and part of it is they just don't know how to take it in to a certain degree. Did any of you guys watch the whole Winston Marshall, Nancy Pelosi debate?
God, no.
Or the aftermath of it? I watched parts of it, yeah.
Because afterwards, Winston Marshall was saying that Nancy Pelosi kept mouthing to him, why are you doing this? And like he felt like this was the first time any of these arguments ever like came to her. And I feel like for a lot of the progressives, Like even the minority speaking out, there's a part of them that doesn't even believe it. They're like, this is the first time they're coming face to face with this reality, and they don't know what to do with it.
Do you think I would say one other thing as well, Sam? But Jacob, I want to speak to your point.
It's a super dad pin because I'm a super dad, and it was Father's Day recently.
Very awesome.
Did one of your daughters make that for you?
Yes.
That's awesome. So, Jacob, I want to come back. Things have changed since 6-7 years ago. There was such a wave in this cancel culture, and it felt like this. You were very afraid to speak out at certain things. People were getting fired. It was getting canceled. They were, all sorts of stuff. Now, I was still, as soon as they did that, I started mouthing off more just because you're not going to shut me up. Right, Jacob? Can you relate? Yeah, if they're going to round people up, they can round me up first. But that has receded. People are done with that BS in so many walks of life where people were really afraid to seem uncouth with their people. Like, so for example, as soon as I found out you couldn't say that you supported Trump and that was just going to break people's brains, I'm like, okay, no, free speech. I'm going to say it. I'm unafraid. Because that was a thing like, oh, you couldn't tell anybody. Ooh, it's like, forget this. I'm not voting for that other crap. So, if it breaks people's brains, I don't care. And, so you're starting to see actually people are unafraid to say they support him now. Because the people who are really going to actually not be a friend with you over it, then they've proven they're somewhere else.
And it's interesting is a lot of that, especially in like the pop culture, has started with a lot of the ethnic minorities, because they kind of said all that outward stuff that you're talking about. I don't care about that. I'm poor and whatever. I'll say what I want to say.
And cancel culture was sensitive to overly tell people of color what to do. So it was a little bit of kryptonite on the paradigm.
Well, I don't know if you saw the back and forth Lance and Jacob, I had with some Breaking Church account on Twitter, where it was like all these white people, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, hey, that's kind of racist. And they were like, yeah, well, they're the ones telling all the minorities what to do and blah, blah. I was like, oh, yeah, apparently I have no agency or ability to think for myself. And they didn't know how to back down from that because they just kept saying, yeah, basically, yeah, you've been colonized and... Like,
but by the way, Sam decided to drop a really hot video today.
What is it?
For which he's going to get canceled and fired from Google.
For calling for liberal free democracy. I know that was my very hyper controversial conclusion. And
you should have heard his Andrew Tate impression.
I did do an Andrew Tate impression. So if you
absolutely masterful,
I have to check that out.
And he convinced me of Andrew Tate's position.
I mean, I was thinking about it, because Andrew Tate tends to get your video in trouble, but I really need to include him in the conversation. And so I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I know a way around the thing. I just read his script and do an impression. And that way it doesn't file any copyright or content strikes because the algorithm doesn't know it's Andrew Tate. It thinks it's me.
It's like a cover. It's a cover.
It's boom, hacked. And I thought it was pretty funny too. So
it was.
Moises,
Mo,
what are your thoughts on this? What's going on with CRC Synod in your mind, Mo? You have more at stake in this than any of us.
Yeah, I was telling them, I think the things that need to be done are being done. It's really clear that, hey, this is everybody. Most of the people in that room are like, this has to be done here this week. We can't kick the can anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's being done very strategically by the chair. The chair is like, let's hear everybody out. I mean, there's been people that are on the other side of this thing that have made positive comments about the chair.
Which is what bothers me.
Well,
I was hoping. I feared a disaster, and it doesn't look like it's been a disaster yet, which is good. I was kind of hoping for very early, very clear no, and pretty bright lines. I haven't seen that. I found the chair to be too Christian in Sam Tinnaman terms. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, and I would say, Jacob, I'm probably more your kind of guy in that. I mean, I know Derek, the chair, and I've always told him, I was like, I feel like you're a bit too nice. I almost wanted him to do like the Key and Peele, where they had the sketch about Obama's like temper, where somebody steps in for him and like says all the things that Obama really wants to say. So like, you should just bring me to Synod with you, and then have me. I know you want to say.
Well, I think a Mo speech from the floor of Synod would be something to behold. I think.
Yeah, why didn't we get that this year, Mo?
Yeah.
Too busy?
Well, again, my sending church, who holds my credentials, is on the opposite side of this thing. So there's no way they're going to send me to Synod.
But you could just say, are you trying to repress voices of color in the conversation? And just,
yeah, why is
anti-hack
it
the
whole Latino sending you as a delegate?
Well, our
that's
pastor
changing,
did
Mo.
send another Puerto Rican guy, and he was fairly vocal today. His name is Israel, a Puerto Rican guy, and he's very much on my side of this.
So did we get to actually see what exactly it was on the live stream chat that people were like? Who was?
Someone immediately DM'd me and said, Jacob just shut down the chat. He was certain it was you. And I have to admit, I thought it was you.
They blocked me yesterday.
Okay.
So
yes.
I have already been blocked on the CRCNA YouTube channel.
Several people messaged me asking if it was me.
I would have blocked you on the CRCNA channel too. Like, so here's your thing about Derek, which is I actually think when I went back and looked, because I wanted to see if all the officers were Abide or Abide affiliated, and they were, and that told me a lot. Secondly, when I looked at him, he does some comedy, like he actually has some comedy in his background. I think having someone with that kind of a winsome spirit in what they're doing now, I think that's a benefit. Jacob, you and I disagree. You can be right or you can be effective. You want to be right, and I think it's more important to be more effective.
No, I actually want him to be effective. I just think
you don't have to. You can be nice. Sam is affably effective. You can get a lot being affable, can't you, Sam?
Yeah, I have a non-affable side that I probably don't use as much as I should.
Like, well, no, every now and again you should bring it out, but you can
mostly
be
with Luke. Luke.
You can be firm and affable.
Okay, but Lance, you realize, and I think we are all agreed that part of the problem is that the infidels, as I call them, are don't know what time it is. You muted yourself, Lance.
The 74%, I think what to me, particularly around this Gravelman, because see, Mo, this would have been what I was curious about Gravelman coming up last night is I could have seen potentially some more moderates that would have voted for the discipline pieces that might have been a little less on board with the Gravelman process, because that can be brought out into a little broader context. Mm-hmm. And when I saw the 74% hold last night again, I'm like, okay, everyone in here knows. And like, even when you watch Paul, I think the moderates know it's time. Like you just said, Mo, you nailed it. Like you're in the spirit. Everyone realized we can't keep doing this all the time. We've got to move forward the decision.
And the patience and agreeableness of the conservatives did help the moderates trust them. And I would say that contra Jacob a little bit, in that a little bit of winsomeness is helpful. Although even I have to say, when I'm watching this Synod and there's these CRC Canadians, I'm like, the level of agreeableness in this thing is absolutely off the charts.
Man, God bless them. And I think but I went back and looked at synods before all these hot topics were. It's awful touchy-feely there. I'll just tell you that. It's awful touchy-feely. I'm more of a business guy. Synod's a business. Let's get our business done. Like that's just.
Did you notice this morning all of the woke liturgy? Like that woman who came on to talk about the new people being ordained. Oh my God. Like it was woke speak 101 for a good hour.
Well, a lot of the people who still have control, like I've noticed that, like even Thrive, like all that stuff, the people who are in the power positions or whatever, they're speaking straight secular progressive language in a lot of areas.
And part of that is just almost losing touch with anything else that isn't that woke speech. And that's the difficulty, is that it had come in and it had spread so deep that it's going to take some time to move that stuff out. Like I find that.
Are they going to move that stuff out?
I mean, to a certain degree, I feel like, especially when it comes to some of the diversity aspect of things.
Is there still going to be power training at the beginning of every Senate?
Hopefully not. Hopefully there's going to be a bunch of overtures this upcoming year to get rid of that. But we knew that first thing had to be first. First things we had to deal with all the stuff that was left over from last year. That's going to give us the foundation to remove some of those things. And when it comes to some of the diversity stuff, like if you put me in a room with about 35 white people in the CRC, I'm the one pushing back against all the diversity stuff.
You and the Koreans and the other Latinos.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's because there's just an improper understanding of it, and the agreeableness thing is they don't want to offend me, and so it's like, first of all, that's a bit condescending. You don't want to offend me. Like, what, am I that sensitive? And so I have to help them understand is that no, we are on equal footing here. I have assets that you couldn't even come close to, and you have assets that I couldn't come close, which is why I'm here. I'm here because I believe that you have something to offer me, but I also believe that I have something to offer you. There's an exchange here, and the more you keep going into that diversity, I'm just here because we just want to be sensitive to you because you're Latino or whatever. It's like that doesn't help me. That's not iron sharpening iron. That's talking about your piece of iron and I'm a little cushion.
Yeah. One of the here's the if I'm looking from the outside, this is church nerd guy Lance following the demographics of the church in the United States over the past 25 years. Is that so? What the UMC did is they had $10 million members globally. They're going to lose about 4 million African churches based off their last general council. They're going to end up, by their decision to go full affirming, they're going to lose 60% of their membership over the next 5 years. It's just going to collapse, right? You guys actually have the opportunity. Venezuela, like I'm hearing these things, you guys actually have an opportunity from a reform basis that once you clear and stay with the always held Christian beliefs and stand on that, you guys actually have an opportunity to grow with true money. Like actually their dream was to become more diverse. Actually, by getting rid of them, you're actually going to have an opportunity to actually become the diverse church that the progressives claim they'd always want, but they would want it as long as they could stay in power.
Mm-hmm. But like, only if they stay true. And that's the tricky part. Like I went to a church planning conference a couple weeks ago, and the whites at that church planning conference were definitely in the minority. It was mostly Latino. We had a lot of Koreans. We had several Africans. But like a lot, if you talk to the Latinos as individuals or the blacks or whatever, the Africans, a big part of what they're attracted to is the polity and the confessions.
They say it all the time.
Yes, it says it all the time. But for a lot of the whites in the room or the Dutch, and some of them are not Dutch, they're just white, European ancestry. They feel like they have to continue to compromise on other things. Like, oh, yeah, we don't have to get into where we think about spiritual gifts. We don't have to get into where we think about worship. And I'm like, what you're doing is you're setting all these new Latinos up for failure because they're going to go into these other CRC that have a completely different way about them. And you're not helping them see the value in their culture. All you're saying is your culture is valuable. Your culture is valuable without any hint at the values of their European culture that they're kind of coming into. They refuse to sing hymns. And it's just like, well, why? Like, I don't know how to sing a hymn. I mean, some of these Venezuelans are like professional caliber musicians. They can sing a hymn probably better than all the white people in that room. Have them sing a hymn.
Do they need a piano player? Sam's available.
Yeah. Well, we went here on one of the
Once the dust settles. Once the dust settles, I'll twist Mo and Vanderklay's arm to get rid of the Athanasian Creed. But not right now. It's not the right time.
But
They
we
can
went up
keep
to
the
karaoke,
constant.
and one of the Venezuelans sang a song. And while he was singing, I couldn't tell if it was him singing or the actual recording. They're on that caliber of level, and we're like, yeah, but we still need to have them do their charismatic music. I'm like, well, we don't have to completely exclude their charismatic music, but if you're not helping them and including your own flavors, which isn't just hymns.
It seems like there's just a lot of boomers in charge of the CRC right now, and
younger Xers.
Yeah, but and that I think at some point, like this woke liturgy, they'll realize how embarrassing it is, and they'll just get cringed into stopping it. And
that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and they just don't realize how much the moral taste buds have changed because they're boomers.
So I don't actually know. Does the CRC are they totally against being slain in the spirit and speaking in tongues and stuff?
Like most things, they're a bit moderate. They're not 100% cessationists. Excuse me. They might be cessationalists. They don't believe that they wouldn't take a hard stance that the gifts of the Holy Spirit have ceased, but they don't regularly. They have them practice in services, and what they would say is, God is a God of order. That, if somebody's going to speak in tongues, there has to be an interpreter. Has to be within a certain level of order. So it just doesn't happen.
Vanderklay said that he was in a charismatic CRC church in college somewhere in the Grand Rapids area. I have no idea if they still do there, if they still exist, but he did at least mention that. And so probably it exists around the edges.
There's probably one of every other kind of church in the CRC.
One of every other kind.
For a while they were just grasping at straws when it came to planting.
Can I ask you a question from back when I put it? You used two words. You talked about they. There's a lot of they thems. So I was asking, who is the reference to they them, and what were you talking about when you were talking about not allowing the gifts and now you're talking about would they be comfortable being slain in spirit and stuff like. Who is your reference to? Because it sounded like you were blaming I don't even know which side is up anymore. There's so many, voices here, other places, so many words flowing around. So who was the reference point of what's the block or who's the block and what would you like to see? Because I went to a church where we did a lot of intercessory and prayer and charismatic stuff, not necessarily directly in the service, but what would be I really want to know. There's a big shift right now. What do you see able to come forward out of this, and what does it look like? Because I would assume that it would be going back to, hey, we can have absolutely nothing. Whereas in my church, it was the kids on the band that were playing the hymns and stuff, and but you advocate for stuff like that.
Within the CRC, there is, it has always historically kind of tried to look for the best in all the traditions, and so I feel like some of the people in the denominational institutions like Thrive, Resonate, these are the organizations that Resonate deals with church planting and missions and stuff like that. I feel like they're not always trying to pull the best out of the traditions, but more trying to say our gates are wide open for your traditions.
So basically they're saying we're not getting involved, we're just opening the door and walking away?
Kind of. Because I think intellectually they say we want the best of your tradition. But I think they don't have the stomach to say that part is going a little too far. Or at least we think it is. Because if they told me with whatever I did, hey, I think you're going too far, then I ought to be able to give a defense for it. And maybe I find out that I'm right or wrong, and we have the conversation there. A lot of times there's many of these leaders are so conflict avoidant that they won't even say, hey, we feel like that's going too far. And I feel like some of these church planters that are coming in from different traditions, at some point they're going to end up involved in a classis, like a regional committee, and that class is going to be like, no, we don't do that here. And they're like, but that's not what I was told. And then you're going to get more friction there that I don't think they would have to do if they were just honest about where they might encounter these conflicts. And so the they is what I'm referring to as some of the leadership within the denominational entities.
Thanks.
I feel like there's a real opportunity to reform Calvin College. And I think there is a giant hole in the market for respectable Protestant conservative college. And
that work had already begun.
Yeah, like Wheaton has completely abandoned that. And there's like really no one else taking up the slack. And a lot of what's this? The other school in Southern Michigan that's conservative that I'm failing to think of. What's that called? What?
Cornerstone?
No, it's like an old school. It's in Southern Michigan. It's known for being politically conservative. Is
that Hillsdale?
Hillsdale, right? Hillsdale College, right, has sort of taken up the slack of, hey, we're going to be a not crazy, reputable college with a respectable acceptance rate and all those sorts of things, except it's explicitly not Christian, although I think a ton of the people who send their kids there are Christian.
Yep.
And so one that was more explicitly Christian and of like a particularly Protestant stripe, because the joke at Hillsdale is you go there to turn your kid Catholic. And so if there was something that didn't turn their kids Catholic, I think that would be really appreciated. And that even like that Southwest Michigan symbiosis thing could kind of help. So
I couldn't agree, Sam. You hear people like Fuller's gone down. Like there's so many of these, so many of these these seminaries have totally shifted. If a parent can trust that I can send, and the students who are interested in that, they can trust I can go there and it's going to have the once held, always held beliefs and get it. You want to, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not CRC, but if I were CRC, I would get it. I would get it. Just again, I would just say,
or even just vaguely Calvinist, right? Like they don't like yes, they can lean into CRC, but their market is vaguely Calvinist families. You know, they could be Presbyterian, they could be James White fans, you know, or even like, I don't particularly love the Calvinism, but I trust them more than anyone else I can trust, right? Like that would be enough.
And I'm surprised it would solve their clergy crisis problem. Like, just think about all the things that it could do.
My question is still, how much money will it take to rename it Servetus University?
Steps, baby steps. We gotta get rid of the Athanasian Creed first.
Calvin University and Calvin Seminary have been turning around.
This is
I can see it in Calvin Seminary.
Files.
Calvin the president was doing a really good job of starting to turn things around. Their enrollment was starting to go up, and then he was just ousted by the board, and in a really controversial way. They're still unpacking all the details of that.
Well, they just settled the lawsuit. That just came up this morning, I think.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So they agreed to a settlement of the lawsuit because there was some lawsuits going on with that.
Yeah, but I suspect that was some of, and again, I suspect this, it could be wrong, but I suspect that was some of the more progressive people in the board and influencers that were trying to get rid of him because he was starting to turn the institution around. Because I've heard a lot of good things about him from student bodies, from other faculties, and again, their enrollment was starting to turn around and improve. But as part of the seminary is definitely taking some really positive steps to do all the things that need to be done to make sure that they're training clergy up, because one of the big things the problems that the seminary had been having in past years is that CRC people don't want to go to Calvin Seminary anymore. They don't feel like it's reformed enough. And so now it's starting to shift that again.
Well, a lot of people are going to Dort. From what I hear, Dort has a lot of...
Yep.
Yeah.
Their enrollment has been up. Yeah. Yes.
They're in Canada, right?
No, Western Iowa.
Iowa, Canada.
Easy
I do know a
confusion.
few Canadians who went there over I was going to say centuries. I don't think they've been around that long.
I did see a Tim Hortons in Houston, which I was like, what in the world is a Tim Hortons doing in Houston?
They have everything in
Long way
Houston.
from
I live there.
motherland.
I live here now, Mo. Yeah,
It's probably really big.
it's a big
It's probably
city.
bigger than all the
It's big
Canadian
c-
ones.
Lance, did you
absolutely
bring Tim
big.
Hortons
Tim
to
Hortons.
Houston?
No, I'm on a budget, Mo.
Okay, I figured out how you can tell which part of North America somebody's from. Ask them what a double W is. Now, in Canada, a double is a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars. On the East Coast, a double is a pepperoni pizza with 2 times pepperoni and 2 times cheese. And in California, a double is a hamburger, is a cheeseburger with 2 patties and 2 cheese.
So In-N-Out opened their first franchise here in the Houston area, right down the street from my office about 6 months ago. So that was a big win for me.
Oh,
Okay,
I gotta go.
you have to get mustard fried, animal style, hamburger. Like that's the best.
The mustard fried's good. I'm not an animal style guy.
Really?
Hmm
What is wrong with you?
I don't like lettuce and tomato on my burgers.
Oh, too much spread. I ask for light spread.
In the
Nobody
Midwest,
lives
double
in the
is
Midwest,
getting
Garth.
12 more than 10 points and more than 10 assists in the game.
Well, to answer Jacob's question, I as a Midwesterner would be like, a double. What are you talking about? Please clarify. So if you don't have something that stands in for double,
But we do have
you're
it,
from the
Sam.
Midwest. What is it?
It's when you in basketball when a player scores more than 10 points
Oh,
has more than
yeah.
10 assists.
Sure.
If they also have more than 10 steals, then you call it a triple double.
Yeah.
That's
In
a
the
triple
Midwest,
double?
basketballs we're still
Basketball
holding.
is-
See, Sam accepted that. Sam accepted that. He's like, yep.
No.
But
I don't know.
Sam's like a Bostonian liberal. He's like
I'm not a little bit. But anyway, but you wouldn't say I would like a double.
Sam's a country club conservative.
I will neither accept nor deny the claim.
let's face it, he's a Rockefeller Republican.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, like ancestrally speaking, that's true. Yeah. The northern part of Chicago suburbs is basically kind of like a weird little New England slice that is in the Midwest. It is kind of interesting that way. And my first ancestors to live here did move here from Vermont, so that's
North Shore's fancy folk.
that's fancy folk.
So do you eat Chicago style pizza or New England style pizza?
Oh, definitely Chicago style pizza, but but a good lobster bake every once in a while is kind of nice. You just have to go a ways to get your lobsters.
Not kosher.
No, it's not.
No lobster rolls when you have Jacob over for dinner, Sam. Note to self.
So, Jacob, do you think that any? Oh, what happened to Mo? Anyway, do you think that any angry Muslims are going to show up and stab me in the eye?
No.
Yeah, thought it was pretty nice.
Too nice.
Too nice, probably too nice.
If you want to actually be famous, I can lend you my graphic.
Oh gosh, Jacob, you are such an instigator.
Yeah.
Such an instigator.
Some people deserve it. Another one of my favorites.
That's a lot of that. Those pant legs are riding up real high. If you can see his calf above
It's
the side.
deliberate. You don't understand how many people were complaining about this image on Twitter.
Am I nuts, or does that look really like the 1950s? The girls used to have those weird rolled up pant legs with the bobby socks or something. Yeah.
So this was designed on the design point was to get people on Twitter to talk about it, and it was wildly successful. It's his Twitter suit. I thought his designers are absolute geniuses.
Ooh, they punted to a bunch of easy. They're doing a bunch of easy stuff tonight.
Okay.
Well, they're gonna do. I see. I guess maybe they had a long day. I would just. I'd get into the hard stuff first. They're doing 4C and 6B. Just
Okay. All right. Tomorrow's going to be a long day for them
yep.
because they'll have to do that tough stuff tomorrow.
I would have got into it tonight. I think that was a fail on their part. I think sometimes the urge is just get the easy stuff done. But if you've watched anything about these people, they'll waste time on the easy stuff too. People got to get up and get to the microphones.
I was actually very surprised. I mean, I don't know that much about Robert's Rules of Order, but he said that after the question was called, you couldn't ask for cease to debate yesterday. And I was like, really?
Oh, isn't that rule where once the question is called, the line still gets to, complete?
I don't know if that's a rule. I think that's a.
It's not a. It's kind of the president can always change things up, but that's kind of it. Call the question, people in queue. He's kind of set, which really what you really need to do, because he said like, hey, we're gonna deliberate this for 45 minutes or an hour. Just set a time so you get it done. Because what keeps happening is people need to be heard. Okay, you hear all this stuff, and the votes keep coming out exactly the same.
I was surprised people are allowed to speak to the same question more than once.
There's that, and it's just. The other thing is people are supposed to, like, if you're going to repeat what someone else said, talk to the motion. People are just meander all over on this for the most part. It's just like,
it's definitely a lot better than last year, though.
Yeah. Last year was the emotional screws were on high, and it was all this breathless stuff. And, I think there's much more resolution to what's going to happen this year, I think.
Yeah. And I think even part of the reason you have so many people still in the queue is because one of the lessons they learned from last year was if you agree with this and you don't join the queue, it's just going to fill up with a bunch of people sharing all the stories about why, and you're just going to spend the whole time there listening to a bunch of people tell you why they think that you're wrong. And so people are like, I'm just going to join the queue to kind of just say, hey, I agree with this so that it gets heard. And to a certain degree, I think that's discouraged people from just getting up and going off on their really long stories like they did last year. And there's always a few people that get in the queue just so that they can call the question.
Right.
I'm a little.
I gotta run.
Go ahead.
See you
See
guys.
Sam.
Don't get.
I kind of want to do the tough stuff at night because I'm working. I use the CRC as my. I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm working and stuff. I've been listening while I've been working. I kind of wanted to focus on some of the more difficult questions.
Yeah, I have people in town that usually at night I'm entertaining, so I was like, I'm not going to be available tonight.
Sounds good. So, well, it doesn't sound like there's
going
to be too much difficult.
We got one of the big guys.
Lloyd, are you doing okay?
I saw the doctor this morning, and he said I can get surgery tomorrow. So 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'm going in to get my knee rebuilt.
I figured something happened when they said you couldn't make it. I knew it had to be, oh my gosh. I was worried about whether someone in your family was ill or whatever. Because I knew it would take a lot.
I tried playing soccer for the first time in my life. I lasted 1 minute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
The first time I'd ever played organized soccer. I lasted 1 minute on the field. I scored a goal. And as I kicked the goal in, the goalie from the other team was diving across, hit my knee that was locked up from the side with all his body weight. And I broke my tibia plateau in 4 pieces. So,
God bless. We'll be praying for you, Lloyd.
Thank you. So anyway, I've been laying in bed and watching Synod.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting how it's been going. So it started a little slow. It took a little bit everybody to get on track and get going. But yeah, I think it's moving along now. There's big discussions yet to come.
That's why I would have put some of that 8 stuff tonight. My strategy would have been to push all the most difficult stuff, front load it. But day after tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what they were trying to do, I think, with getting through Gravamen today. I mean, they pushed and got that out early, and it was hard work, but they've been making progress.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing when I thought like last night, just kind of it's too much time on that short part of it, which is I do like him moving to shorter and trying to just time limit, because the fact of the matter is we have these conversations and these votes are just continuing to stay as consistent as the day is long. And so the body knows what it's going to do.
Yep. It does. So
how do you feel about missing out on this historic synod?
I mean, you're getting blamed for all of it.
I think there's lots of people that would choose to do a lot of things over synod. I think most of them even would choose to do synod over laying in bed with a broken leg. So yeah, I think most anyone would prefer to be at synod than that. And I definitely would rather be there. But I held out hope as long as I could until a surgeon was talking to me and like, no, you can't do that. That's not going to happen. And so then I had to call in the alternate and say, I'm out. So
that had to be disappointing because you put in a lot of work to prepare and be ready.
It was harder than hearing that vacation, and then last week when I heard that, oh, you're not going to be able to walk on it for 90 days after surgery tomorrow. And so all summer was gone. That was the second biggest disappointment. But yeah, not going to synod was hard.
Well, you read the institutes.
There we go. No, I watched synod from bed and chat with you guys, so that's how I do it.
No, I tell you, we talked about this earlier.
Commentary. My channel's your channel. You can just run commentary the whole time. And now they're not allowing people chatting in the live stream anymore.
Yeah, I saw that got kicked off today. So, yep.
I think that's smart. Actually, I think that's smart. If you're going to do this, I would have had comments turned off regardless. I think that's smart. There's Twitter. There's other places like Facebook. People can make comments.
You don't have to platform it in your on the denomination site, I guess. I don't know.
It's not the denomination site. It's YouTube. Just leave YouTube and let people do whatever they want.
No, Jacob.
It's the denomination's channel, and I don't know. I'm quite libertarian leaning, where I'm like, let people have it out and let them fight and debate, and that's my leaning. But I understand if they just want to keep it off of their channel and not have the ugliness, and not have someone sitting there trying to police the comments, which I'm not sure I'm going to agree with how they're policing them anyway. So.
Yeah, what's funny though is I'm pretty sure that we're just random people. We're just reporting people that they didn't like.
Probably.
I actually wonder like what made them hide me, because I definitely did get hidden on the channel.
Well, I would have hidden you. I would have hidden you, Jacob. I would have hidden you too. And I like you. I would have hidden you too. You're too irascible, Jacob.
Although I will say one of the things I was grateful for when they closed down that off is my head was going crazy because I kept trying to go to YouTube to look at that the conversation and go back to Twitter to see who's commenting there.
I don't do the Twitter thing, so I don't know what. I mean, I got on after Sid just to find out what names I was being called because I heard it was worth seeing, but that's all I've ever been on Twitter.
You know, there's not, as you look at it, there's not a lot of heavy. I mean, Paul's little circle of us who watch, right? So there's us. Yeah. There's because I follow it. I'm sure there are certainly some. Not a lot of people are using this hashtag CRC Synod and stuff, but I don't see a ton of it. Do you, Mo? Like I don't see Twitter as
going after the regulars to try to see if they're doing it, just because I remember last year, and my kind of goal for my work on Twitter is just to make sure that if people are going to say something that's completely nonsensical, that there's somebody that's going to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And they just haven't been saying as much. And to a certain degree, I think now they know somebody's going to respond to it. And and not only is it somebody, but it's somebody who happens to be Latino, and they know they're not supposed to go there. So, and it's so silly, but like there's
Yeah.
one guy, Ryan Struck, who
Yeah.
he's been posting a bit, but it's been mostly his frustrations.
Hold on, isn't he on the floor?
No.
Yeah.
I commented on your video. You had that wrong last night.
Oh, okay.
Ryan Schreiber and Ryan Struck. You had the two of them confused.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So Ryan Struck has just been putting like his, complaining. I'm like, that's fine. You have your upset.
Yeah, he has a right to say that.
Yeah,
Sure.
but it's when they start attacking, like making racist statements, that I'm like, no. That's not coming into play right now.
Oh, like that one gal, all the cis white males are authoritarianly like that gal.
Yeah. I'm like,
what?
All right, lady, let's talk. Let's talk about whose identity is more or less privileged in this moment.
Well, so Herb, we're always glad to see Herb show up. That's always a good time to see him there. He was on a majority report that has a minority report out. There's also, you have that one, we've got a minority, we have a majority, and then we have a minority A and a minority B coming up too. Have you seen that, Lloyd?
Yep. I know all that stuff. Or I've looked at it quick. So, yep. The minority B is one person and just saying, yeah, let's not do any discipline. The majority report there is, let's do discipline and deal with things, but we're not actually going to make anyone do anything. There's no teeth to it. And the minority report is, no, we have to follow through and actually have teeth. Last year we said we need everyone to guide into compliance, and we got a whole lot of non-guiding. And so it has to be a lot more direct and forceful than that. So yeah.
So that's an interesting committee. That one's gonna that one's gonna be interesting.
And Committee 8 is even more so. So yeah, that has, I know there's some appeals in Committee 8. I don't know if they'll get to the floor or there'll be executive session if they do. And then Committee 8 also has other discipline matters, and
so basically
a strong committee of my friends on Committee 8. So I'm like, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, because it was curious. So now that makes sense now, because when I was reading, what you're talking about is Committee 2, Canonical Services.
Right.
So if you guys want to go to the Synod 2024 documents, it's 2B. There's a majority report. And I look there, and then so if we've got this minority report, I'm just trying to see where we've got here. 1, 2, 3. There's a lot of people on that committee, dude. Wow.
Each committee has like 19 people on it, 18 people on it.
So some
of them this year had a little less.
So you had 9 there on the majority.
I think 8 or so on the majority.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, they got to 10, so that's how they could call themselves the majority.
Okay.
So that was 10. And then it was 9, and then you've got minority B. Yep, she got Elizabeth. She wants none. Okay, so basically what we've got that came out, wow, that's really interesting given the 70%, 20% split that that minority A ended up not being the minority opinion. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a hard thing to do. It's the moment that they couldn't do last year with Paul DeVries throwing it off of actually following through and disciplining. And it's one thing to make every statement in the book and put everything on paper. It's another thing to actually live it out and have consequences.
So that's where the rubber's going to hit the road. So we're going to see whether, so now that I'm looking at 2B is going to be the one I'm looking for. And also you've got some stuff down in 8 too, which matters.
Yep. And 8's going to be that's a tough sled too, some of that. So,
well, the interesting thing, I could click through this afternoon, the access to those, I saw them yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, this morning, the minority reports. They're not available right now. I thought that's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they have to edit something in there, so they pull it down for a minute to go back and clean up a sentence or something like that. I mean, we got 2 or 3 people trying to process and make sure all this stuff is worked out and spell checked and everything else. So they just pull down a report sometimes if, we need to make a amendment here and change something, and then it goes live again when they get it fixed up.
So one of the things that was interesting to me as I was watching this, Lloyd, I would have felt some of these discipline issues, and there's it, but I would have almost thought, and I was surprised, quite frankly, to see that 74% hold, because I could have actually seen on the gravamen piece, like if you listen to Paul and others, it's like, okay, I understand we have to do something, but that could potentially, you could convince me that has a broader thing. So that would have been something that I thought maybe some moderates might have been a little more hesitant to stick in that 74%. But
I mean,
that held, it pretended to me to think people know what needs to happen. And what also has to happen is if we're going to do this with this gravamen process, we then need to have the discipline to follow it up.
Yeah, I think the discipline votes, I'm guessing, will be probably closer to, I think it was recommendation 7 in committee 9, that they wanted to kick the one overture to next year instead of actually dealing with it and addressing it. And that was the first vote, I think, of this synod that I remember, that the majority motion that came to the floor failed. That was the first one. And that vote was like 103 to 78 or something like that off the top of my head, somewhere in that line. I'm guessing that's closer to the line of people that say, no, we have to do discipline now. We're going to do the hardest things, because them saying no to that and saying, we're not going to leave out hope that, well, maybe next year we'll get an exception, so just hang in there. That's what that vote was saying. And so for people to do that, that's the hard thing. So
yeah, it was 101 to 79.
Hang on. Earlier in the conversation, I was asking Moises, like, what happens next? That whole, how does this proceed forward? And what you're talking about now is part of that reason where up, like the first 2 years, it's the tone and everything is different. People are looking at just debating around the main issue. At this point, when the issue is decided and people are still pushing it, each direction and debating, like my thought was, it gets to the point where you're saying, so as a denomination, as an entity, we are taking up the call to run this way with the, this equipment with these, like, sorry, thinking sports, like you're going down the checklist, how do you carry through the rest of this synod to come out of it in a way where next synod, the in-between year, people have gone, this is who we are, this is what we carry, this is what it means, this is why. These are all the whys, not just what do you think, what does it look like going through these conversations to get to the point of this synod, so that there's practicality, so it's not just a matter of, okay, and now another year, but actually saying this is what has been forming by the time we get to next year. Like, yeah. How does the whatever it is shift? Right.
I don't know. A little bit of the conversation that Jacob and Lance were having last night of, will the woke, the progressives, those that are pushing to be affirming, will they leave or not? That's the question. Is the CRC sending enough signals and making it unattainable for them to just continue on and say, well, we have hope that next year everything will change. We have hope that space will be made next year. Or are we clear enough that they will divide, or will we actually throw some out and make them separate from us?
That's why I'm asking.
Hold on, Sandy. Lloyd, you commented on the other video that it was the UMC where that thing I thought happened. Right. So how do we know that the CRC is not going to have that same thing happen?
Well, the majority has been far stronger in the CRC and more stable, and we do not have at this point the mechanisms that the UMC had working against it. The UMC had their vote in 2019. I'm not a UMC expert. Lance probably knows more than I do, much more than I do. But 2019 is when they had their big vote. That's when they were 50-some% majority. Then they didn't have another gathering until this year because of COVID and other delays. during that time, the bishop said, we're just going to continue to do what we want to do in the U.S., and that's what broke fellowship with and made many of the conservatives leave. And then also to further hurt the vote totals this year, I know that the denomination didn't give the green card, or not green card, but the proper things for African bishops to come and
They gave them late.
participate.
They gave them late notice. They gave them late
Yep.
notice and played games, and that's why literally the African continent, which is averages, the guesstimates are between 3 to 4.5 million, up to 7 million United Methodist Church members, didn't participate effectively. And so again, the global church, the progressives have played dirty in the UMC the whole way through.
Yep. And so they don't have that opportunity in the CRC polity, because Synod has too much power, and Synod is not riggable because it's all of the people from all the classes. You have to rig all of the classes to try and rig Synod. It's going to represent the churches. And so Synod has the power to act and bring discipline if it has the will. And that's what we're learning.
And so if you're a progressive, so Sandy, here's if you're a progressive, because what's coming in is actually bringing discipline into the confessions, which is coming up on the rest of the votes, right? And if you're an activist progressive, if you're watching PVK's channel, their hope is this discipline, that the discipline doesn't get in place here. They've got their friends in Better Together who have $1 million in the Eli Lilly Foundation, and they're going to try and go to their moderates, and they're going to try and come in, and they're going to try and convince people, hey, don't kick us out, don't do this. They're going to try and hang on and hope that in time, either that would cause conservatives to get frustrated and split off,
right,
or they can swing enough of the votes finally in their favor. The thing that I think that's a little different from them, Lloyd, now to then is like, this whole cancel culture, all this stuff's receding. Like people are just tired of it. Independents, like even people that would not be considered conservative at all in the regular sphere, we see all through that. We just see through this stuff, you know. And so, I think banking on society and at large to come further into those extreme views, don't count on it, because it's actually the pendulum sleeping back. So these are some other things that I think the CRC has an advantage. Because some of these folks were going through these divorce questions during the height of the pressure in the early 2010s and everything else, when there seemed to be all this momentum. And if you even spoke out against it, you were a hateful, misogynistic, xenophobic, throw all the names out there, right?
Yep. I would agree.
That's what happens when you cry wolf. I mean,
yes, I think
people stop
the
listening.
piece for the long term is like the gravamen is the long term. That's been taken care of. Now we need the piece for the short term. What happens to these activist churches? Because the gravamen doesn't apply to them.
We have about 20 some activist churches, and I really appreciate what the delegate tried to do on opening Friday morning. That was close.
I was very disappointed that did not carry.
I was not happy to be laying in bed instead of there in the fight. I'll leave it at that. I think we could have swung that, but it didn't work out that way, and maybe it's all for the best. But yeah, so we have 20 churches out of our 1,000 churches, so 2% of our denomination that has declared itself publicly open and affirming to various levels. And that just you can't stay CRC with that, is what we have to make very, very clear.
Well, and you're not going to grow, because as soon as people see you have that and you're in the middle of it, you're not going to get to, because a lot of people are trying to make a decision. They want to go to a safe place, and they're not going to go to the CRC while you're in the middle of this.
Yep.
What's the name of the chair, Derek?
Yes.
Yeah.
He made a speech on Saturday morning, which was like, oh God. I was like, really?
I like Derek.
I'm sorry, but he's like, yes, I had a conversation with them, and they agreed that despite the fact they don't actually believe in the confessions, they're still going to pretend they do.
Okay, so my question to that thing was, Was it because there was this midpoint between some of the stuff that was carryover from last year and some of the stuff that was happening this year, and so it would have been a problem, perhaps, in terms of synodical process? Was my question. Did he choose to have the conversation and say, we're going to let this play out until the point when it cannot play out, or
Right.
He was being soft. That's
He-
what.
He
In
was
Jacob's mind,
he, he was being soft. At the same time, he couldn't go and enact what the body failed to enact by the delegates' motion from Iacota. The delegates' motion from Iacota would have dealt with that, and so it would have had the conversation and given teeth to Derek and the officers to decide and expel.
But it failed
failed.
because he
So
ruled
he
it
had
out of
no
order.
teeth. He ruled it out of
He had
order.
not ruled it out of order. If he
Yeah.
had not opposed it the way he did, then it would have passed, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
I
pretend
also
that
think
I
that
was.
Derek is confident and probably a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. I think he's confident where he thinks the Senate is going.
Maybe. I think that he ruled it out of order, and how if I had been there instead of laying in bed, would have responded is something along the lines of, yeah, Mr. President, you said that you want to guide this body along the lines of our normal process, and a motion like this would certainly be out of order by going by our normal process in history. However, we also have, at this point in time, 20 churches that have declared that they disagree, but they're going to keep doing and being CRC no matter what. And so we have a bigger out of order issue that needs to be addressed by this motion that the delegate has put forward. And that's why I do not believe we should sustain the chair and that we should debate this motion. So I would have said something like that, hopefully. And I think it would have been fine that Derek ruled it out of order, because it's not the normal order, but I would have made the argument this isn't the normal times either. So
Well, his gamble will play out tomorrow.
yeah, yep, it is, and it has, and yeah, I mean, the gravamen
I'll
stuff
let him hear
being
it if it doesn't
settled is
work.
huge. What's that?
And I'll let him hear it if it doesn't work out.
Mo's gonna be
All right,
the
yes,
angry
I have
one
to
on Twitter.
go. My wife has come to hold me accountable.
Okay.
So,
God
but
bless
a
you.
pleasure.
you, Mo.
We'll have to do another one later this week.
All right. I have no idea what condition I'll be in after surgery tomorrow, so who knows if I'll be back.
Good luck. Maybe you'll wake up. You'll wake up to joy or tears,
Yeah,
Lloyd.
something like that. We'll see.
how
So
long is your surgery? Did they
I
tell you?
don't know. He didn't tell me exactly. He's like he had 2 surgeries scheduled in the morning. He said those will be quick, and mine's a little more involved. So I'm guessing it'll take him an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. I don't know.
Well, hopefully it won't be any more painful than some of these votes.
Yeah.
No, I was actually genuinely worried. So somebody earlier said that nowadays things get settled before the parliaments, and that's actually what you want, is things to be kind of settled before you actually have the meeting, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's preferable, and I was a little worried that it didn't seem to me enough. There was enough talking, especially across channels, before Senate, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I was afraid it was going to be a disaster. It doesn't look like it's going to be a disaster. Father Stephen a while ago said he thought the conservatives just are not going to be able to hold the line. When I saw what was going on in the first day, and frankly after Saturday, like the speech Derek is his name gave on Saturday, I was like, okay, these people don't have the stomach Last night I was expecting them to, because somebody like, how about we sleep on the vote?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
oh, now they're gonna sleep on this vote. I was happy they didn't sleep on the vote.
Yep.
I guess we'll see what happens, and I'm by nature very pessimistic, so I hope I'm wrong, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think that it, too much holding back is not kind either. Well, it isn't, and
Yeah.
like the little house church I go to, well, you can guess which side they're on.
Yeah.
Like I've got a ton of friends who I keep asking Jacob if I'm woke, because I'm pretty sure over 60% of my friend network is probably.
Oh, your network is definitely very infected, but let's be serious here. There are people who are woke because they've been infected with a lot of bad ideas, right? Yeah. My good friend Mark Parker, he's definitely been infected with a lot of bad ideas. Then there are people who are actually woke, by which I mean that they speak the liturgies, like that woman who was crying at the podium this morning. And they, but they're speaking the liturgies with ulterior motives because they want what they want. And despite the fact Paul Vanderklay doesn't like me doing this, that Rita woman, from everything I've seen of her, like, she's the type of person, like, if she's going to a church, I'm not.
Jacob goes to more churches than I do. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So this is where Jacob and I disagree with, which is if you don't hold the conservatives, you don't win the day. I'm sorry, the moderates. And so you're threading a needle. And so to come out, could you have tried to push the ball? At least it'd have been nice to see where the body was at, because you could have figured that earlier on and then decided all of that.
Right.
And I think it would have been fair. Listen, if you can't sit there and if you're not in agreements with the confessions, you shouldn't have been there this year, based on what's happened in 22 and 23.
Right.
So
Those
I understand what your point
is. Settled. Yeah.
And so again, like there also is there is just the political tone that you have to take, because again, like I mentioned, and I tell Paul what I think. He kind of was talking about, and some of the therapeutic deism language, he kind of pointed to millennials, like the softness there. But at the same time, the traditionalists, the always held beliefs of the Christian faith, they're just pointed out last year is they're not winning with grace, or they're too harsh and they're not listening. And so if you go that realm, and that also that irks the moderates, and so you're trying to thread this needle here, where okay, we know what we have to do. We're going to do this with sensitivity. We're going to get on about our business, and we're going to do it, with and Derek's a winsome guy, and that's good. I think that's good. And so to some extent, you're doing tough things last year, but I think the emotions are. Like when Paul mentioned it, and I had mentioned this earlier, but I don't know if you heard that, which is like the first year was the shock for them. The second year was the fight at the funeral, the anger. This year they're still tactical. I mean, they're still fighting to win the day to a certain extent, but they're also, for the most part, isn't that just the emotions were unhinged, and the screws that were putting them on emotionally from the progressives from the floor last year were just intense, trying to just wrangle everything they could out of their moderate brothers and sisters, and it held. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because ultimately that didn't win the day for them last year. It didn't, because the votes held. And so, listen, when you're Derek, and if you're going to have a decent enough voting block that puts it, based on even that last vote, if we did that, you got to try and find some way to thread the needle. And I think the way Derek is doing this, as long as he needs to keep pressing these things to the votes.
Right. I mean, that's part of the problem. Last year we ran out of time, and so if you look through, there's still a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's going to be big discussion. Another big thing is number 6 that they'll take up tonight. That, you know, we've been in relationship for 40 some years with the RCA, and we swap pastors back and forth with the RCA. And the committee tonight is saying, we got to stop that. We got to put a pause on that. That's going to be a huge discussion too, but it goes in line with everything else that they're doing. And so, you know, to be consistent, you have to live this out in every way. And so that'll be a telling vote a little bit tonight too.
I want to ask you about pedo baptism and credo baptism, but
what's that?
Laura was asking what did she cry about? So she was doing the ministry, like she was the person who was the people who were being ordained, and yeah, and she started crying about women not getting enough support, which is kind of like, yeah, I actually do think eventually the CRC is going to have to revisit women in office. But because I don't, what I have seen is women, there is a reason why thousands of years of experience tells us you don't want women in office. And every denomination that I've seen, you know, it just does not work well. But I want to ask you about pedobaptism, because apparently there's a lot of pedobaptists with Gravamina out there, or no?
Well, there's a podcast that talks about pedobaptism. A friend of mine and I have been doing a podcast, Three Forms podcast, where we do 30-minute once a week podcast on the Heidelberg Catechism Lord's Day. And so they release on Tuesday. So last week's was on pedo versus credo baptism because we were dealing with that part of the catechism in Lord's Day 27. So I grew up in Credo Baptist circles. So I was Credo Baptist before I came to the CRC. And so that's part of my history and part of my story. So I get it.
So do you think that there is a possibility that like eventually they're going to have leniencies like for people to be Credo Baptists?
I'm not sure. Where we stand historically, we stay pretty strong on that. There have been some churches that have been letting some people through. There was talk, I didn't know if there'd be a motion, and it didn't end up playing out with Gravamen, but there was talk of, and there were overtures to the effect that you can't take a gravamen over something that is sinful. And so they were trying to make the distinction that to say, I have a gravamen, so I can go ahead and support same-sex marriage, even though the denomination has said this is in violation of the Seventh Commandment, sinful, is different from, I have a gravamen, so I'm not sure we should be baptizing babies. That's not the same level of promoting sin. So there was talk that something like that might happen with Committee 9, and it never did. Yeah, I don't know that we'll revisit that. I think we're right that we should be baptizing babies, and I think we just need more people to listen to podcasts and get on the right page.
So,
I'm with you. Baptize the babies. Baptize the babies.
I totally, so this is one of the things I totally disagree with. I've seen no warrant whatsoever for pedobaptism, but I'm not a Christian.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We go to Genesis 17 in that podcast, so we talk about believer circumcision and infant circumcision. So,
but the other thing is like, so if you come up in an infant baptism situation, and I'll just think about this in the Protestant world. So for me as a Methodist, but then also when I was 13, I went through confirmation. Mm-hmm. And so there is that adult moment where you come together, you get trained, we got trained in, Wesley and all the Methodist stuff. And then we go in front of the church at that point as 13-year-olds, and we make our, profession of faith and confession of faith. And then we're received in as members there, so to speak. So it's not as if those, particularly in a Protestant sense, now it's a little bit different in Orthodoxy because it's like everybody's in, we're all the same family, so on and so forth. Now you still need to raise your children up into the faith and so on and so forth. But, I think, I think in a lot of the people, even, so I came out of the infant baptism piece, but here's where I was at, Lloyd, which is when I was doing the non-denominational, and I was going to be a part of that, and I was going to do a non-denominational house church planning movement. In my training that I did that, they kind of had Westminster Confessions of Faith, but they believed in adult baptism. So I knew if I was going to join. So here's why you submit. I felt my infant baptism was sufficient. Mm-hmm. But I knew to join them, I had to submit to their confessions and beliefs. And so what did I do? I got adult baptized.
Yep.
Because that's what this church says we do, right? And I didn't have to file a gravamen about it or whatever. Right. No, I mean that. It's like, no, if I want to join you, this is what you believe, and it's up to me to conform. And then over time, and then by the way, if I'm going to preach and teach in that sense, then what do? Well, then I don't do infant baptisms. I do adult baptisms. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's so simple to me. Like, you don't have to join the group if you don't want to join the group.
Exactly.
So what happens there's a lot of, like moving our homes and then moving our churches when, like not just church hopping in the old sense of the word, but, because we move around a lot these days as a people. And then you're looking for somewhere to connect. What happens if somebody like Lloyd, who's infant baptized, joins in a church that demands an adult baptism and then goes back to joining a church that only does infant baptism? There
are no churches that only do infant baptism. So the CRC does not only do infant baptism. So yeah, if you we in the CRC
that was baptized as a baby and one kid that was baptized at 8 because we were attending a dedication only church for a while. And by the time we moved to Acton, he's like, yeah, no way, no how. And I'm like, I'm not doing the screaming kid at the front of the church thing. When do you want to be baptized? When I'm 8. Fine. We're planning it.
Nice. So yeah, I would personally, I wouldn't go to a church that required adult baptism because, well, I don't know. I was baptized as an adult, so I'm not sure if they would accept that or not. Probably not, because I wasn't fully immersed. So that would be another requirement that they would have too. And so I would not be able to join a church that would require that based on my convictions. I understand other people hold things looser, and so they would do that. I would see that as a sin and an error, but not the unforgivable sin or anything like that. And so, yeah, it could be forgiven. And if they went back and joined again, there you go.
See, this is the thing.
I don't get it.
Yeah, coming from a Jewish point of view, like, especially when you look at the archaeological evidence of the ritual baths, like in Hasidic neighborhoods, like, people daily going to the mikveh is like I mean, I never went daily, but I certainly used to go weekly. So like this entire idea of like, no, don't ever do it again is like,
right. Well, I mean, it's creedal. It ties in with the Nicene Creed. We believe in one baptism for the remission of sins, and so there's a long history in in Christianity of not rebaptizing people. So
I'm going to express my complete naivety because I never thought that meant once in time. I thought it as in, if you're baptized into Jesus, or this is the one baptism. There is only one way in which you will be baptized, which would be into Christ, if that's what the church is saying. I thought that's what the creed was saying.
I would say it covers both. I would say it covers both. So, yep.
All right. Well, I've got to head out. Got to get home. Well, I guess we'll finish up tonight and be prepared for tomorrow, Lloyd. And good luck tomorrow, Lloyd.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Nice chatting with you, Lance. Good seeing you.
Good to see you.
So, yeah. It's getting towards 7:00, and so Sand will be starting up here again soon, and I'll probably drop off of the chat myself to go rejoin that in a little bit.
I see. Okay. Well, was there anything you specifically wanted to comment on, or?
I threw a couple comments at you trying to fix your problems last night. So, but other than that, I don't think there was anything else. I just, I was catching up on your video from last night, and I was wondering if you were going to be on tonight, and then I saw you were on right now, and my kids and family are all gone, and I'm like, oh, it's a quiet house. I could chime in for a little bit. So.
Yay!
So,
Well,
yeah.
you're always welcome. I haven't watched. I had a colonoscopy today, so
Yeah, I heard you had that this morning. Yeah, that's why you signed off last night. So
yeah, so I haven't actually watched what happens today. But Mo asked on Twitter, like, hey, are you guys gonna do something? I'm like, well, if you want, I will. So
okay, so that's how you got started. So yeah, nope, I joined in an hour late, but yeah, here I am.
And we have Michael.
Hi, Michael. I think I've
That's
seen
me.
you round the corner a little bit, but I don't know if we've chatted or met at all. So,
No, I don't think we have.
Yeah.
I've been on things here and there. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Michael's Eastern Orthodox, so
Okay.
he's traditional Protestant.
Well, Lance left, so I mean, somebody had to come.
Someone had to fill that void. Very good. So, yep. Yeah, I don't really have anything else. I don't know if you have any other questions, Jacob, about anything Synod-wise or what comes next. I think we've discussed it.
I have two questions for you. One, Aaron Vriesman was asked, is Abide auto sunsetting, and do you think it is an organization that's going to sunset itself? Or is this going to be something that's actually going to be a lasting thing? Or what's going to happen with Abide?
Yeah. My guess, being one of the people that's not on the steering committee at all, so I have no vote in this. But at the same time, a person that's been deeply involved in it for the last 3.5 years since it formed, and on the admin team of it and so forth. So I know a bit of what's going on. My expectation is I think it's most likely for Abide to a sunset, and that there was a post in CRC Voices a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago, maybe 3, talking about is Abide now the CRC mainstream, and I think that's kind of the goal of the Abide project. It wasn't to go off and do something else or be something else. It's to be CRC, and for the CRC as a denomination to be heading together in the same direction. And so I know there's lots of people that have involved that have different ideas and dreams for the future, but my expectation is to get rid of a little bit of the extra work that it all is, trying to maintain and keep everything going without getting $1 million of drug money. That's
what I was going to ask next. Okay.
And so that it's all a volunteer operation, and it's not without time commitments and work and a lot of effort. And so if we were able to sunset it and morph back into just being the leaders of the CRC, we have a couple of Abide people connected that are the chairs of or the leaders, officers of Synod this year, because that's who we are. We're CRC pastors and involved.
Are Abide people actually gonna take the denominational offices?
We are.
You are, okay. Because
I think so. I mean, I don't know. Synod will vote, but I will be going on the Council of Delegates, the interim team of Synod of in between Synod if Synod votes for me this year. Okay. So yeah, we're moving into these places, and we're just going to continue to live it out and work it out in the denomination. We don't need some secondary mechanism to replace the denomination if the denomination's functioning properly. So that'd be my expectation.
Yeah, that's my whole thing with whether the denomination, because frankly, my anticipation for the goals of the whatever you want to call the infidels is that they're going to want to hold on to the denominational offices until you guys get tired and leave?
I don't think they're going to be able to with what was decided on gravamen.
Okay.
That gravamen has to, that now all the boards and agencies, they have to bring their policies in line with the church on gravamen. You can't be a revisionist and continue to sit on some of these boards because of what Synod decided even today.
Okay.
So there's a change and a transformation. Part of it's an age thing, that some of us are a bit younger and in our 30s and 40s, and some of those that were leading this denomination for a long time, they've retired and are stepping away, and we have a little different vision of where we're going, I think. So
I like it. I like it. And you mentioned the drug money.
Yes.
So the $1 million, it went to Better Together?
yes, 1.25 million. So
Yeah. So I noticed they were claiming, the guy on PBK's channel was claiming, oh, this isn't just money to try to make us not believe in the confessions anymore. You know, we're gonna be having discussions together. And my thing was, oh, so how many Abide people are you gonna spend that money on? So have they actually been trying to talk to Abide at all about how they're going to spend their $1.25 million?
I don't know how much talk they've been having with Abide. They did hold an open house during Synod that I was invited to because they got all the delegates listed and tried to invite all the delegates to it.
Okay.
So I was going to go see what 1.25 million offered for different souvenirs and snacks and stuff, but then the broken leg prevented that. So I wasn't able to check out their gathering.
Jacob, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
So, Lloyd, if you got to go, feel free to
Yeah. It's 20-minute delay on the live stream, so we got a couple minutes.
Okay. Under what premise? All right. So for whatever degree of resistance towards, let's say, postmodern social justice, sexual revolution ideas, what do you see as being the basis or premise, in short, of which anybody within your tradition uses to confirm or deny that?
Okay. So are you asking why, what arguments those that are like affirming, open and affirming churches are making to try and justify the stance they're taking? Is that what you're asking? Or
A little bit less of the affirming side, because unfortunately I got deeply steeped in that.
okay.
But the resistance against it, in favor of, I guess what you might say, more traditional stances towards towards family and identity.
Right.
You know what?
Right.
What's the basis or premise at which
Well,
the
I mean, if
tradition?
if you watch the live stream from last night in the debate, you saw that many of those that were speaking against the motion were getting up and talking about family relations and people and these sorts of reasons for why we shouldn't do these things. Whereas many of the people that stood up and said, no, we're called to live this out, they were quoting different passages of scripture, and it was going back to God's word over and over again in the arguments they were making. So I would say that it's been a refocusing on biblical fidelity and understanding that has really fueled this opposition to the progressive narratives of love and affirm everyone. So it'd be biblical based, I would say. That answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Does that imply, right, if they're invoking scripture to resist some of these postmodern social justice ideas, is the implication then that those ideas miss the mark?
I would say so. Yes, that they're based on unchristian ideas, woke ideology that has come in, or that they're a twisting of Christian principles that have gone out of balance, principles like love and grace that have been detached from truth and justice, and so in those ways have become unbalanced.
How is the line mitigated between all the ways that we miss the mark, generally speaking, versus being so egregiously off the target that it's schismatic?
Yeah, I mean the heart of Christianity would be ongoing repentance, and so yeah, faith and repentance go hand in hand, and so the problem is with the affirming discussion, it's the denial of sin and the denial of need for repentance, and so it's promoting and encouraging and blessing that which God has forbidden. Yeah.
You're coming at it from Michael's coming at it from a very, very different point of view than I think you might be used to.
Probably.
Yeah. So part of the discussion we've been having is this modernity, post-modernity, and what do we do after modernity, post-modernity.
Right.
And the explanations you're giving seem very modern.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm reading Michael correctly, I think what he's saying is, okay, how are you going to deal, give an answer to postmodernity that isn't just going to have the same questions come back up over and over again? If you didn't listen to, I forget if it was a 3-part or a 5-part, you've heard of the Rest is History podcast?
I've heard of it maybe, but I've not listened to.
It's a great podcast, and they did a 3 or 5-part series on Martin Luther.
Okay.
Highly, highly recommend it. And I think what Michael's getting at, which is part of what this whole Jordan Peterson sphere and Paul Vanderklay discussion has very much focused on, is like, where do you go with when Martin Luther's thing of, hey, just read the Bible. I mean, but this is what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. Why can't you get it?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm reading the same Bible you are. That's not what I'm getting, right? And if I've been reading Synod correctly, I think one of the things that, especially through the Gravamen, but this whole few days they've been hammering on, is no, you don't get your own private interpretation of the Bible.
Right.
The interpretation of the Bible is what the church says.
Correct.
Which is a very different orientation, and I think partially why Reformed has become so much more popular among Protestants recently is because there's an explicit denial of I get to read the Bible for myself, and I get to decide what it says for myself.
Right. There's the community and the covenanting together that is critical to our understanding. This is how we read the Bible together, and so this is what we've agreed upon, and we submit to one another in this.
When I listened to Michael's question, I was thinking back to my ex used to go off on a tangent about postmodern stuff. But in the same time, he spent ages reading the institutes. But at the same time, he wanted to be involved with the small groups ministry that were doing the Alpha course and all of these outreach things, which came from the seeker-sensitive things that drove him nuts. But he still wanted to be there and get involved in community. There's, like, during that phase, Alpha's from England. It's from a completely different denomination. Like, there's a lot of and Michael's question is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but what I heard was, if you're talking about a spot where you can read you can even re-ask the question, but if you put it into the terms of the Bible, like, my ex was very sola scriptura. But what it involved was simply saying, here is a problem, here is a text. Here is another problem, here is a text. Here is another problem, here is a text. And when I hear that, what is the line between this and that? What is that fine line where this saying, okay, well, you're reading this slightly that way, and we're all kind of doing this, and there's a little bit of wiggle in the needle, but suddenly there's this place where you're coming to a place where you're like, oh, wait a minute, we're not in this together. We're not in agreement. We're not. What do you do in that place? And I think sometimes when I look back over in my church, that can happen really easily, and you just don't notice it, any more than the frog in water, because you're so busy doing what you've been told the church does, which is reach out to people, do ministry, evangelize. Here's the 5 billion classes that our small groups ministry is going to give to teach you how to go out and do this. And suddenly you're not where you were anymore. Like, there was a huge shift in some of the mood and culture of the church in the almost 30 years I was there. But they were all still people with a shared vision for, this is who we are, this is what we're called to, this is what we do, this is why. There just wasn't, like, how do you determine that?
Well, I guess part of the answer in the Reformed tradition certainly would be our confessions. If we are understanding Scripture and reading it in line with our confessions, if our confessions are teaching and informing how we understand Scripture and the direction we're moving, then that is part of what unifies us and keeps us moving together, to still have Scripture as our highest authority, but at the same time, it's not every man for himself deciding what does God's word say to me. So it's the tradition and the confessions that guide us and keep us moving together in the same direction, I would say.
So I was thinking of that this week in terms of how, like, in listening to Jacob's streams, where you talk about there's the written Torah and there's the oral Torah, and the oral Torah is that thing that the rabbis, who are sort of the most learned and the ones that will give guidance, are steeped in. Are we alluding to the fact that our confessions, if they're functioning properly, are supposed to be an equivalent kind of, here's the Bible, and here's all the people that have looked at the scriptures, and they've studied them, and we are like, are we trying to do the same thing?
I don't know if we're trying to do the same thing as an oral, but to some extent, it is a summary and a condensing that says, hey, this is the general groundwork that we're thinking on some of these big pictures, and so these smaller things can fall into their proper places therein related to the confessional understanding in our confessional direction. And so that's part of what keeps us unified and moving in a direction together, as long as we don't ignore the confessions and get so busy doing this or that and then start believing that, oh, this is what the church is now. And so we've lost touch with our confessional basis and grounding. So,
Lloyd, when someone when or if someone within the tradition finds identity in a more modern way, I am this, I identify as this, right? Be that by I identify as a cat girl, or I identify as a homosexual man, or I identify as a cisgender male, or these things, like using this kind of language.
yeah.
What's your understanding of the reaction within your tradition to being presented with that?
Yeah. I would say the confessional reaction would be to turn to something like Heidelberg Catechism, Lord's Day 1, and the declaration that we understand that we are not our own, but we belong body and soul to Jesus Christ. And so that is our foundational identity. And so the other things that one would get caught up with or competing identities that they would have, our tradition would say, that's not foundational. This is what is to be the greatest foundation, the largest truth, the most important and overarching reality is your unity with Christ.
So if they're willing to verbally confess that that Jesus Christ is where they find their identity, and then in addition to that, they are a cat girl, how do you deal with that?
Well, yeah, I think you would explore scripture further to look at how, going back to Genesis 1-2, and look at the creation and understanding in those ways how God made things in their kind and in their order. And so that would be where we would go for a second step after recognizing the greatest identity in Christ. The second step would be submitting to his created order and his plan.
How do you see the means of identity?
What's that?
How do you see the means of identity?
You're going real deep.
What's that?
He's going
It's a good
real
question.
deep.
Yeah.
How do
And
you
he's got,
define identity?
I'm on the outside of the little quarter and not deep into the Peugeot and all of those discussions. So yeah, he could get beyond me pretty quick apparently. But yeah, how would I mean, identity is in our created being. We are creatures and we have been created by God in his design and for his purposes and in that order. And so yeah, that would be where I would go for what is a real identity. Who am I and where do I belong? And yeah, that's how I would answer it.
So Caspian is asking, is Pardes' approach to reading the Bible helpful to Christians as well? I think Christians misunderstand their Bible because they don't know what Pardes is. What some Christians have started doing is they've started talking about Paul as Midrash. That's become a popular thing for Christians to talk about recently. And I think once Christians start actually reading their Old Testament on a serious basis, you end up arriving very quickly at, obviously, Paul is not explicating the simple meaning of those verses that he's quoting. You can't you have a very, very hard time reading what Paul's saying, going back, reading what it said in its context, and then saying he's just explicating the plain fundamentalist meaning, because they just don't match. Yeah. So yeah. And as far as like what is identity and what is not identity, like I'm going to venture to guess, even though you've probably never heard of nominalism. Have you heard of nominalism, Lloyd?
Yeah.
Okay. You seem to be coming from a very nominalist point of view, and what postmodernism or postnominalism has done very well is ask a bunch of questions that nominalists have a very hard time answering.
Okay.
Which includes, okay, like this word identity is really important, obviously, because your identity as a Christian is obviously very important. But where does that definition, what I understand Christian being defined, but how is identity, which is what Christian, so going one level beyond it, like where does that identity come from? And if I am interpreting what you're saying correctly, I think what you're saying is your identity is ultimately created by God.
Right.
Like everything is created by God.
Yeah. But that's the ultimate reality that we are connected to, and the eternal truth. And so, yeah, that would be how I would understand it.
Yeah. Am I interpreting Lloyd's to Pajot in a okay way?
I don't know Pajot, so I couldn't tell you.
I don't know Pajot either, and that's what I have to say.
Okay.
Pajot really rubs me the wrong way because he has a very different symbolic framework than I do. Because mine is biblical and his is Christian.
Okay.
Hold on. I have this just for.
Good.
Nice. Well, on that note, I'm not welcome here anymore.
You are always welcome.
My Synod watching.
You are always welcome, but
Uh-oh.
you recognize that guy, right?
I do. Yes.
You're always welcome, Lloyd.
Very good.
Thank you for dropping by. I hope you have a very easy surgery and you get walking pretty soon. And we'll see how the rest of the Synod goes.
That we will. And if I see you making more mistakes in live streams, I'll at least chime in the comments. So
please do. I actually pinned your comment from last week. Try
to set you straight.
Yeah.
All right. Good seeing you all.
Talk to
nice
you
meeting you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Likewise.
Bye.
So did I do a good job of defending Lloyd in postmodernist terms or no?
I think if we're to think about language as a type of consciousness, then these postmodern ideas are the inevitability of that consciousness, and it's also like a self-destruct.
I don't think postmodernism is inevitable. Actually, what somebody actually asked me a little bit earlier here. Isn't wokeism a consequence ultimately of liberalism as a philosophy? And my response was, no, it is a consequence of atheist Christianity.
It also depends on what you mean by liberalism.
And part of, I don't know if you saw the discussion last Friday. I think mostly, yeah, liberalism. I mean, in a sense, liberalism is atheist Christianity. There is, and this is why actually Ken's video from today was excellent, although I don't think a lot of people are going to necessarily, although it seems to have gotten a good reaction. Let's put it this way. Anytime Sam Tiedemann is struggling with something intellectually, it's above my pay grade. And he was seriously struggling with what are the edges of liberalism / Christianity. And I think that's what a lot of what we're struggling with is. And my response to Sam was, and I quote, "Salvation is of the Jews. The scribes and Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses, and all that they say you shall do." I think Christianity is unraveling with postmodernism because that's how God set it up to be.
Well, part of the problem that we're in right now, though, even in this discussion, is the encapsulation of certain notions within words, right? We're casting spells around here, right? So you're dropping bombs every time that you use the word Christianity because there's a boatload of implications, right? So then in order to have a fruitful dialogue, we almost have to participate in a postmodern deconstruction, right, in order to even attempt to get on the same page. Where we like to even talk about theism and atheism,
Right.
No, are we even on the same page about what those things mean to either one of us, right? So, like,
did you listen to my discussion with T-Rock?
I did. I sure
What'd you
did.
think?
I know that guy. I know that guy so well, and like he's in there,
Yeah.
right? He's in there.
Yeah.
And I hear that voice all the time, right? I'm not escaped from exactly what that noise sounds like all the time. And one of my best friends, who 10, 12 years, one of the things that united us was effectively being militant atheists, right? Like very Dawkinsy, militant atheists.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I hear him, not only do I hear the old man within, but I also hear my best friend, right, of 12 years. So that was the first thing that struck me, is just how deeply familiar it is.
Okay.
That's an example of someone to me that has a house built on sand and is doing everything possible to fortify the absolute shit out of it, right? And they're working hard. They're going overtime to keep that house on sand up, but it's constantly under the threat of collapse, which is one of the things that makes it so funny of all the times that he spends in this corner.
Right. But I think that deconstruction is happening. So atheism is deconstructed. And that's why I mentioned it when you said, when we talk about theism and atheism, right? Like, and again, I'm going to cast more spells, but I think these are spells that work.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I use these incantations.
Well, but it doesn't mean that they're good, even if they work.
I hope they're good.
I hope so too.
I try to be the wicked witch of the White West.
Great mix of metaphors.
Which is, I mean, I'll go back to Maimonides. I believe that Christianity and Islam were created to spread a message, which they, through their natural life cycle, will show that the message which they carry is in fact what is important. Think of it kind of like a fruit and a seed, right? Which is you eat the fruit because, like, an animal eats the fruit because they want the fruit. But the whole point of the animal eating that fruit was in fact for the seed to spread. And the seed is what is important. And I see Christianity as the fruit, and I see the tree being torn. And so for me, when I see the deconstruction, and you're absolutely right, there is a deconstruction that's going on within Christianity. But I don't see that deconstruction getting at the root of where Christianity comes from, which is Judaism.
When you guys, if I can just ask about that one word, deconstruction comes up a lot. And in a way, I suspect your question to Lloyd was aiming at that, in a sense, without saying so. But what do you see? What do you mean by it's deconstructing? Or like what does that, if I was watching it, if it was an event like a volcano going off or something, and you're describing it to me because I'm blind, what do you see? What is it?
Well, I like the way that Peugeot talks about it. He describes somebody looking at like a Greek statue, right? And they're like, it's just a bunch of rock. It's not that special. It's just a rock. It's just a rock, and here's the parts, right? And then here it's on a platform, and so then you start pointing at the pieces, right? And then the focus, your attention now goes to pieces, and you're not able to see any beauty there. It's just like, who cares about some boring rock, some boring marble? Why does that matter, right? So it's to come out of a unity of beauty into hyper particularity.
And is Jacob's description of the fruit and the purpose of the animal eating the fruit also a form of deconstruction?
I probably need to chew on it. The thing that comes to mind for me that comes to me it comes to my mind when it comes to seeds and patterns is fractal realities, right? So the seed is the pattern that gets enacted. And so here's a little tree, a little baby tree, little tiny tree inside of that seed, right? And it gets planted, and the tree expands, and then it bears fruit, and then the fruit has seeds, and those drop, and those bear, right, more trees. And so it's this endless fractal pattern of reality. So that's one thing that comes to mind for me. And then the other thing that comes to mind for me is, and I'm not sure how to work this into what Jacob was actually getting at, but the fruit and the external beings that feast on the fruit, it's not that it's for feeding or that it's for just the tree. It's both.
Mm-hmm. And is that a type of deconstruction? Is that one of the purposes? Or like when Jacob says postmodernism and you get into this whole deconstruction is inevitable kind of thing, is it because we are in some respect designed to constantly be seeking that, why it's both, and we don't know what it's called, we don't know how to define it? Probably especially in Christianity we don't, because we've specificist, whatever, because we've put so many sticky notes on things. We've lost the page.
So for me, it was about lies, right? It's a Solzhenitsyn communist lying problem. And so I allowed myself to have a couple of lies. And then that was building a foundation on it. I started to build a house on sand, right? And so there was lies at the root of it, and then I built more lies on top of it, and I had separated out into a totally different reality. This is a house of cards, this house of sand, right? And when that happens, right, when a narrative or a consciousness is created that is built on things that miss the mark and are out of line outside of natural reality, then collapse is inevitable, just like a house on sand or a house of cards. Deconstruction of a lie is inevitable. It ultimately dies and breaks. How long it takes, it has many variables.
So we often use the house analogy when talking about our beliefs, and that is deconstruction like a remodel, meaning that you're going to go and gut out everything that you thought you understood that you really don't. And that, like, at least for me, I went through what I think you could probably call a deconstruction. I went in as a Protestant and came out a Catholic, but it basically was looking at what I had been handed by my father, by what I had been handed by culture, and asking myself, is this going to go forward with me in the future? And so to figure it out, I do what I always do when I'm confused by something. I break it open and just literally deconstruct the thing, start taking it apart, simple pieces first, then get into the harder stuff. And I emerged what I believe now to be an actual Christian. I don't know that I was actually a Christian before. And that.
So there's an important difference between annihilation and dialectic, right? So there's an idea that so one of the problems I have with things like the Heidelberg Catechism is there's a question and an answer. And the answer actually answers the question in a way that you don't actually need the question anymore, right? Which I think is a failure of asking a good question. Because a good question, first you have to hear the question, and then you can hear the answer, right? And if there is no going back in time, there is no actual erasure. There is no, what I have experienced, like, it's funny. This morning I was talking to one of my nurses, and I said, if I was 18 again, I probably would have gotten my bachelor's in nursing instead of public relations and political science, right? But would I have, like, if I had done that at 18, right? It's like I can't go back in time. And at 18, there's no me that's 18 years old and still has the experiences of 46-year-old Jacob, right? And so if you view deconstruction, which I think a lot of people do, as a process of elimination as opposed to a process of digestion and integration, which I think is absolutely false. This is why you get people who will even call themselves pre-modernists, right? They're like, I want to go back to pre-modernity. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, there's no going back in time, right?
Right.
There's no going back to being a child.
So there is a sense where you could align yourself to the tradition you came from, integrate the experiences in between where you rejected them, and find yourself at the end of that in something that looks a lot like what you came from, even though you can't be there in the past anymore. So you have the past, you have the journey away from it, and the journey that's not necessarily back to the same place. It's still forward, but it's back in alignment with what you started with, right?
Oh yeah. No, totally. Yeah. Well, and even what you're talking about right there plays into the seed idea. Like, oh, well, I had a thought. Let me say it out loud so it makes sense. Like for me, I was trying to get closer with my family. Like, well, I got divorced and I needed people. And so I was trying to get closer to my family who I understood to be very, very Christian. Like we were raised Christian. We went to church a lot. We participated in a lot of like youth groups and everything. But as I like started really breaking open what we believed, I started finding like things about what we believed that just wasn't rhyming. And like, anyways, the whole Catholicism thing after that. But anyways, I eventually ended up in the Catholic Church where I'm at now, and haven't missed a mass in like a year, and like became very religious. And me and my dad have a harder time communicating now than we ever did before because he's a Protestant. And so it's been a weird trip. But the reason I bring that up about the seed is I believe that God may have used my own selfish motivations to get me to where I am today. Meaning that like I wanted the fruit, but the seed getting to where it was supposed to get to so there could be a tree there one day. That, like you were saying, that was a part of the system, a part of the process, and that. So like me being installed in this community, this Catholic community, even though that wasn't my goal, when I started ripping apart my understanding of God and Christianity, that's where I'm at now, and it's going good. It's benefited my life. Like I'm in a good place, much healthier than I was before. And but the reason I bring that up is just like deconstruction has benefited me a lot, and I almost always hear it talked about as a negative, or at that people almost talk about it with like a sadness, like that I was lied to my whole life by the church, and and now I'm an atheist, and it makes so much more sense to me. But they're not necessarily happy. It seems like not, and I'm not just saying happy, but I mean like they're not content with where they're at. It seems like even post deconstruction and all that. That just makes me wonder, like in my reference to a remodel, some remodels aren't done right, but and sometimes they're worse off. But I do agree with what you said. You'll find yourself in alignment with something that you knew before. Like I knew I always trusted Christ. Like I always knew if I die, go towards Christ. Like whatever you see, whatever you encounter in the afterlife, go towards Christ. That's the good guy. And so like I just trusted that. I don't know. I mean, literally, I trusted that. And I mean, psychedelics were involved, getting off of booze and trusting marijuana more. And like, there's a lot of things that went along with this stuff. But where I'm at now is just, I don't know. It just is like that, what you guys were talking about as far as the seed, like the thing that got the fruit and the seed getting carried forward, it was all part of the same system. It wasn't like, oh, that was actually the purpose. It was like, no, the whole thing was the purpose. Like the eating, the moving of the seed, and then then the expelling of the seed and it getting planted and stuff like that. Like I see that in my own life through deconstruction, I guess you could say.
Josh, when you were talking, one of the things you said about your relationship with your father, I really resonated with. I spent the better part of 10 plus years not talking to family at all. I rejected those Christian evangelical deplorables. That's really how I would have thought of it. And I didn't want to talk to them whatsoever. I cut myself off from them. I had chosen family. And so to my surprise, finding myself back in a Christian tradition, one thing that's been helpful to me in trying to build a bridge back to my parents has been kind of a wheat and chaff thing. Okay. So there's things that I'll hear, and I have to do this to myself too. This is a pretty universal thing, but certainly with my parents. So I'll hear something that is just kind of wild, or I think could have bad fruits, and I don't have to go after that, right? I can leave that alone. But when I hear something that is wheat rather than chaff, I can reinforce it, right? Things that are in patience and self-control and kindness and joy and gratitude. Like anytime that there's a little hint of that, right? I can go, that's good. That's good, right? And then they don't get that good. They don't get this, that's good reaction to the other things. And it becomes a wheat.
So you do like silence as negative reinforcement, and then do like encouragement, or like you get excited and be like, yeah, that thing. Like you give that as your positive reinforcement, and through that you change the relationship. I kind of came to a similar, like me and my dad. I say we were further apart, but it was literally just the other day we finally. We argued through it, but we actually prayed at the end together. And he said, okay, he's like, well, I got to get going. Let's go ahead and pray. And as a Protestant, we were growing up, we just always prayed. Like we didn't have set prayers and that, but I was like, okay, well, it's like, let's do the Our Father. And so we said the Our Father together. And he teared up at the end, and I teared up in the end. And I think we both realized, out of all of our arguing about God and the scriptures and everything, I don't think we've ever, we've hardly ever said the Our Father together. You know what I mean? And stuff like that is actually that's changing the relationship. But yeah, it's been pretty crazy. Yeah.
Well, Galatians 5 has been really meaningful to me, right? In discerning the flesh versus the spirit. This is the way Paul talks about it there. So then, he's really explicit about factions and divisions and arguments and dissensions being of the flesh, right? Versus patience and self-control and kindness.
That's fair. Yep. No, and like I said, I really have just because I'll talk to him and I'll be like, we'll talk about, like, for me, apostolic succession kind of just stops the thing. It's like I don't know. I've always been a kind of, I guess, like a person who, like, if you were here before me, you kind of have dibs, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. Like, that's always been a unsaid rule in my head. And like when I found out there was Christians before Martin Luther, I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't know what I thought, but I just always assumed that there was, because I knew about Catholicism, but my dad always told us that, like, yeah, we don't even know if they're really Christian. Like, that was just what he always said, or like, it's basically a cult or something like that is what I got, because they pray to icons and stuff.
I've found a lot of Peterson's perspectives really, really helpful on that, because I'll talk to my parents about those kinds of things, and it's like everything from because they go, oh, the Catholics, it's a cult, blah, 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 right? I grew up that way, right? Everybody, all the Catholics were going to hell.
Yeah.
And so, especially in the moment that we're in now, right? I'm like, hey, that seems a whole lot better than a bunch of people that want to drop acid and have an orgy, right? So isn't it beautiful that there's these folks in this old tradition, right? Kind of keeping it like, thank goodness they exist, right? These are folks that you'd still have dinner with, and you should want to, because if they're not doing that, there's a whole lot worse pagan things that they could do. Don't forget your history, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, because that's a really good point. There's because I get it, because my mom, my mom came to my daughter's baptism, and as on Easter, and as the priest is going around doing the sprinkling of the water, he got a little on her, of course, like you're supposed to. And I literally saw my mother go, this woman has been a lifelong Christian. Like, I mean, we read the Bible together, like growing up and stuff, and I just could not believe the level of I was like, Mom, I wouldn't even do that just out of respect. I was just, but like I said, it just, it's just, I laughed. Yeah, I just like, oh God.
Well, it's a reinforcement of gratitude, right? It's like, thank goodness that, like, okay, you go, oh, look at these Christians that only go to church on Christmas and Easter. Yeah, well, at least they go on Christmas and Easter.
Yep, it could be so much worse.
Because there's a world where people stop doing that, and it gets a whole lot darker, a whole lot faster, right?
That's fair. I really like that perspective. I like that, to consider the human as somebody who probably doesn't necessarily have a bottom to their debauchery. Like, we can get so dark as humans. I mean, and we've seen the history of that.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of Americans, a lot of Protestants especially, don't understand what happened in Russia leading up to World War I, World War II. And just knowing a little bit about what happened there can really transform the way that Western Christians are thinking about things, right?
I think my dad's recently gotten interested in history, and so he's actually been looking at the Eastern European history of Eastern Europe, and the bad leaders that they had, and I think he got back as far, or towards, because he was trying to understand some of what Putin was talking about with the Tucker Carlson interview. Putin went 1,000 years in the past, filled Carlson in on everything leading up to today, and he's like, and that's why I have a right to Ukraine. I was like, okay, you made your case. It involved 1,000 years, but it's I don't know if that's really, but I mean, there's people that are laying claim to lands that they had formerly 2,000 years ago. So, and they've only, so that's a whole other thing. But hey, sorry.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, hey, I had a question for Jacob. I don't know if he can still hear or if he's even still in here. He might. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Hey, Jacob, you know more about the Old Testament than anybody I've really heard on here, and most of the guys on YouTube, as far as I could tell. But I recently, and you were talking about how your symbolism interpretation or your symbolic interpretation is different than Paju. I wanted to. I came across the story of David dancing nearly naked in front of the ark recently, and I heard an interpretation on the story, and I wanted to run it past you real quick. It only took me a second or two, or a minute or two, and I wanted to see what you thought of it. So David is dancing in front of the ark. He celebrates so hard, he basically becomes half naked. His wife, I can't remember her, Mika, looks out the window, sees him dancing, and when she actually encounters him later, she basically calls him an idiot and a fool, and is like, you look like an idiot out there, and you became disgraced in front of the slave girls. And he tells her that I will become even more indignified, and I will become even more glorified in their eyes. And that there's a couple other points of the story, but this is where the symbolism took over, or the guy who was doing the interpretation started talking. He said that Mika represents the Jews, Jesus, or David represents Jesus, and that the slave girls represent the Gentiles, and that the Ark of the Covenant represents the Virgin Mary, which I've heard the Virgin Mary being interpreted as the Ark of the Covenant. That's pretty common in Catholic circles. I don't know if it is in Eastern Orthodox, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that up on you and see what happened.
Yeah, that's silly.
Okay.
So, first of all, our understanding is, that's something that gets quoted quite a bit. I shall become even more undignified in your eyes. So Michal was the daughter of Saul, right? Yep. And like the idea is that the those who would lead are the servants of all, right? So David dances before the ark because he is a servant, and she misunderstands that, and like I have zero clue where they would get all of that interpretation of like David is the quintessential Jew, right? And my understanding, and I think the general understanding is it is saying what we've always said, which is when, I guess you could say David is the Christ figure there, because it's like you do that which belongs to God without caring about your own dignity, right?
And I left out one part, or the reason that it was kind of linked of David's nakedness is that Christ is nearly naked on the cross in front of his mother, and David is in front of the Ark of the Covenant, nearly naked, and the Ark of the Covenant is commonly, as far as I know, almost.
It talks about. It talks about Hitgaleh. He was revealed. If I remember correctly. David Ark dancing. So this is in 2 Samuel 6.
Yeah.
So let's pull up 2 Samuel 6.
Thanks for doing this, by the way. It was literally just something that came up in a conversation, and it was always an oddball story for me. And so I was like, these are the types of stories I like to talk about, because like there's always kind of a weird image in your head, and you're kind of like, what do I do with this story?
6. And David and all the house of Israel played Mesachakim Lifnei Hashem, before God, in all manner of instruments made of cypress wood, on lyres and lutes and timbrels. And when they came to Nahon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out. This is.
That's where the guy dies, right? When the guy puts his hands on it.
Yep. And he gets mad, and then, well, let me see where. 14 through 22. Okay, 14. And David leaped about before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod, which is the priestly garment. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sounds of the shofar. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Shaul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David dancing and leaping before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tent that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of the hosts. And he made a distribution among, and so departed. Then David returned to the house to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Shaul, came up to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, in that he uncovered himself today." So nigla means to reveal in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the low fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. Kehigalot niglot achad harakim, literally one of the empty ones. And David said, Lifnei Hashem asher bachar bi, before the Lord who has chosen me, me'avich, from your father, Mikol Beito, and all of his house, Letzavot oti nagid al am Yisrael, v'sichakti lifnei Hashem, and I played or danced before the Lord. V'nekaloti od mizot. So this is something rabbis quote all the time. Nekaloti od mizot, and I shall be even more light. Haiti shafal be'inai, and I shall be lonely in my own eyes. Ve'im amahot asher amart imam ikabeda, and among the maidservants or female slaves that you spoke about, I will be honored. And she did not have children because of what she said. Well, I mean, I can definitely understand why Christians would want to make Michal be the Jews there. I don't understand where they would get that. As far as the nakedness, I guess you could read that into there. That's not. I don't think that's something the verse is explicitly saying.
When Christ is on the cross and does it ever use the word revealed, speaking about his garments falling off or anything like that? Because, like, I know it's hurt that he was barely clothed, and often in icons and that he just has his loincloth on. But somebody, I forget who it was.
Would have been nude. This is one of the things. I mean, I did a stream at Christ Circumcised about why Christ is never shown circumcised. Like, Christians deliberately, Christian iconography never showed Jesus circumcised. Despite the fact that even during times when they would show anybody else naked, and it's obvious on the cross, they didn't bother putting a strategic loincloth on Jesus. Like, this is one of the things, this is one of my, like, Christians need to repent of moments, which is they deliberately, and I actually went and checked, and art historians have done surveys, and apparently in all of Christian art that we have from over 200 years ago, only like twice is the baby Jesus shown being circumcised, but never shown actually circumcised, despite the fact that the Gospels mention his circumcision, right? So, but that's a whole other thing. I don't know what the Gospels say as far as him being revealed, but yeah, I mean, this idea and unekaloti od mizot, I shall become more light. I mean, literally, it's a pun there. And there's actually puns, obviously, in this story. A lot of the Bible has a lot of puns, and part of the pun here is, I will be made light, and he says, I will be heavy among, like, I will have honor is literally, I will be heavy, right? Right? So I shall become more light in from this before, in my own eyes and before God, which shall make me more weighty among the maidservants. And yeah, the maidservants as the Gentiles actually does make sense. But yeah, I mean,
Jacob, how do you see David?
That explanation too much.
How do you see David?
How do I see David as an imperfect Messiah? I think Yosef, when he talked about the Messiah being the son of David as opposed to David, was pretty important, because the Messiah we are looking for is Solomon, not David.
Because isn't it Solomon's number? Like, what was the number that was ascribed? There's a number ascribed to Solomon, right?
There's at least one. I think there may be more than one. Oh yeah, I mean the Catholics and the Orthodox both have the Feast of the Circumcision on their thing. As far as I know, very few icons actually, like I said, I actually looked, and apparently there's like nothing which actually shows a circumcised Jesus, which is understandable, but not, I mean, it's not just Victorian morality. Like, yeah, Victorians never showed a penis, but I'm not. I think like Michelangelo has penises all over the place, but he still never showed Jesus circumcised.
Okay, so
No.
David,
I'm gonna get.
Yeah. Thanks,
It was
Josh.
good talking to you, Michael. I want to talk to you again, but yeah, I gotta get going. But good talking to you. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks for coming.
And I'm getting pretty tired, so after this, I'm gonna end the stream. But yes, you were saying, Michael.
Oh no! If you want to end the stream there, I was only going to go a little bit further for Josh's sake and to digging into the second Samuel, because you just like there's like a cascade going that I think culminates in Bathsheba, right? Where you see the imperfectness of David sort of hitting in like layers. So that seems interesting, but we don't. There's no reason for you.
I'm actually pretty tired. As before he said, I wanted to ask Jacob. I was actually typing a message to you that I'm gonna let this stream go, and I'm gonna go in a minute. Just to answer you, Caspian, there are many Jewish messiahs, and as far as I'm concerned, they're distinct. But I will tell you my favorite Christian joke, which is a minister goes to teach Sunday school, and he says, "What has 4 legs, lives in a tree, and stores nuts for the winter?" And none of the kids answer. He turns to Timmy and he says, "Timmy, what has 4 legs, lives in a tree, and stores nuts for the winter?" And Timmy thinks about it a bit. He says, "It sounds like a squirrel, but I'll say Jesus." And a Christian told me this story, because as far as I like everything, I like the Christians, like everything has to be Jesus. And for me, not everything has to be Jesus. So,
we're never going to distinguish between a tremendous amount of the world and a different tradition. That's okay. But I do understand where you're coming from on the Western Christians, because that's exactly what I grew up in. And I probably gave that answer that way. But before you go, since you're worn down and you're tired, maybe this is the time to ask.
Yeah.
Look, you're using this word to identify multiple messiahs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word is made of little letter marks, right? That they're all little symbols into themselves and brought together. They're now a bigger indicator mark or symbol pointer. And so the term itself, Messiah, right, has a through line. It's identifiable by characteristics.
Correct.
Right? Fruits. Right.
Okay. I mean, so it's funny. I was just talking about this with Sam Titteman a bit.
Yeah.
And I said, what does oil do? It glistens, it glistens, it anoints, and it burns.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the through line of the word Messiah, right? So things are anointed in Judaism. The utensils of the temple are anointed. Various people are anointed. Elijah is anointed. The prophets, the kings, the priests, right? There's all kinds of anointings, right? And that anointing is a matter of being chosen, and I mean, in a sense, it goes back to what I was saying to Christian last night, which is the problem I have with how Christians view Jesus is not that they view Jesus as the Son of God, is that they view him as the only Son of God.
So this is, let's not do this now, but
okay.
I don't want to have a discussion about Jesus. I want to have a discussion about Kyrios.
About
Kyrios.
Kyrios.
Yeah.
That is a very different discussion.
Right. So because like I almost want to talk to you as if I was like a Zoroastrian.
See, that's the thing. So Kyrios, I mean, the word or master or Adon, right? It's a relational term. It's a relational term.
And I'd use a couple of terms to point at the same thing. And so the characteristics of Messiah, right, of Kyrios, and so like,
I would almost say those two terms are antithetical to each other.
So
not that somebody can't occupy both at the same time.
Yeah.
But they, in fact, point to different relationships, right?
Perhaps, but there is
son and father, right?
Yeah,
are in a sense antithetical, not meaning that there are no fathers who are sons and there are no sons who are fathers.
But they're always in relation to each other. One can't be without the other.
And they are in opposite relationship.
They're both separate and together. Both
No.
True.
But I do mean opposite, as in anointed and Adon, right? Those two, and I guess this does get into Psalm 110, right? Is in a sense, you are anointed by the one who is your Lord. And to be anointed is to recognize the anointer as Lord.
Yeah. So
okay, I am way too tired.
Yeah. Well, to pause here, this is where I'd love to pick up with you someday.
Okay.